The last thing that we want to show you, in fact, people arriving here at the airport appear apparently friends or family members of some of the victims of at least one of the flights. 3 flights were bound for Los Angeles, and they are not arriving here, obviously. Now friends and family are beginning to trickle in. We haven't seen any until this moment, 2 people just arriving here at the airport. We can tell you that just within the last 15 minutes also, this terminal they have begun a process of evacuating this terminal, and in fact all of Los Angeles airport is being evacuated now, we are told, by airport police, who we just spoke to just a few minutes ago. I'd like to let you hear from Lieutenant Howard Whitehead of the Los Angeles Airport Police as to the status here at LAX.
Because we work with other agencies who are conducting closures outside of the airport, I can't get information right now.
3 flights were bound for Los Angeles that appear to have been involved today. What accommodations are being made for the friends and family of passengers?
That's being handled by the airlines. They're having a meeting now concerning that, so that information has to get from the airlines.
So officially, what are you starting at this point?
We're starting a total evacuation of the airport.
Will that include both workers and passengers?
Only key employees will remain at the airport.
This is the entire airport that will be evacuated?
Yes, ma'am.
Why is the evacuation?
Because the evacuation has been ordered. I can't tell you why, but that's how it stands now.
Is there a threat to the airport?
It's precautionary at this point.
Have you ever seen anything like this before in Los Angeles?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And what is going to be your role, the police department's role in this? What are you doing?
We're protecting the public. That's what our job is.
Will roads in and out of the airport be closed as well? Will people be able to get into the airport?
Right now, this thing is fluid. We're working as we go with the changes, so I couldn't give you a definite on anything right now.
How many police officers more or less
Thanks very much.
here in the airport on a regular day?
Other agencies involved, I couldn't give you an exact figure.
Right now there are other agencies?
Yes, ma'am. That's all I have for right now. Thank you. My name is Lieutenant Whitehead.
So this is what you're
That was Lieutenant Howard Whitehead of the LAX Police telling us again that just within the last 15 or 20 minutes an order has come down, a command decision to evacuate the terminals at LAX. Up until this point, of course, flights were not being allowed in or out. Now they are evacuating all the terminals except for key personnel. Also here with me now is Lieutenant Colonel Al Van Cleef of the Salvation Army. You have the very difficult task of helping to coordinate the grief counseling. Can you tell me about the accommodations that are being made for family members of Flight 11, 77, and 175?
We have 6 grief counselors on site now, 2 of the teams ready. We're waiting word now from American Airlines. They are diligently working on the plans as far as a private location where the family will be received. As soon as we're aware of that, then they will make contact with us so our counselors can proceed to where family members will be arriving. We've done the same thing here in Los Angeles as well as San Francisco and Washington, D.C.
Very difficult day for you, sir. Thanks very much for joining us. That is the latest from Los Angeles. Aaron, back to you.
Frank, thank you. Frank Buckley in Los Angeles. We are in the midst of extraordinary national tragedy, attacks in Washington and New York, attacks on airliners, the dimensions of which are not yet clear, but what is clear is that this is a day unlike any other. The worst fears of officials around the country, security, intelligence, military officials, political leaders, worst fears being realized, being played out in New York and Washington, 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh where a plane went down. Other planes have crashed. We don't know the circumstances precisely. We now have a report perhaps of another building here in New York that has collapsed. CNN producer Rose Arce is on the phone. Rose, what can you tell us?
Yes, there's another building very close to the World Trade Center that was hit by debris some time ago, and it appears to be on the verge of collapse. Also, that enormous plume of smoke that you see that's surrounding the building, there are suspicions that it's not all smoke, but that there's a gas leak within that smoke. And that has caused a tremendous amount of panic in this area. The police have been saying that they're now evacuating all of lower Manhattan, and you can see people moving north in a flood through these streets. They're just filled with ash. You know, as you walk through the ash, you can see debris from inside the World Trade Center itself, a very, very eerie scene, pieces of paper from people's desks, office supplies, many, many blocks from the site of the actual explosion, where they now are fearing that there may be yet another explosion because of this potential gas leak.
Rose, thank you. Rose Arce, who's on the streets of Manhattan. Back to Jerry Hauer. who who ran the mayor's emergency response team, and I'm not sure I got the title right, but the essence is correct. When you all, after the 93 attack on the buildings, and you sat down and tried to redo a plan, which I assume happened, did you anticipate anything of this magnitude?
Well, we have plans in place in New York City for massive incidents, but an incident like this is very difficult to plan for, just because of the number of people that have been, the number of responders that have been injured. There are
the responders, we mean police, fire,
EMS,
rescue, correct.
Right. There are literally hundreds of people coming from New Jersey. As you heard from the governor early, the National Guard will be activated to help with law enforcement to help seal the area. I know that FEMA will be activating their search and rescue teams to assist with going through the debris. This is going to be a long-term operation. It is going to be a very difficult one because, as you heard earlier, there's still a gas leak in the building, which is fueling this fire. And until the gas is turned off, that fire could burn for some time.
Stay with us, Jerry. Back to Washington. CNN's Judy Woodruff. Judy, you have more here. What can you tell us?
Well, Aaron, we are monitoring, of course, statements from around the globe, and we've just, in the last few minutes, been able to get a statement from the Taliban ambassador to Pakistan. The Taliban, of course, being the religious organization that is the party controlling the government in Afghanistan. The name Mullah Abdul Salam Zaif said in reaction to the news of these terror attacks in the United States, and I am quoting, "We want to tell the American children that Afghanistan feels your pain, and we hope that the courts find justice." Now, this statement, again, made by a Taliban ambassador to Pakistan, his name, Mullah Abdul Salam Zaif, he made it at a news conference in Islamabad. And I would just add that we're told that at the top of the hour, which would be perhaps 1 o'clock Eastern time, we're expecting a news conference live from Kabul, Afghanistan. That is the capital of Afghanistan, the Taliban being the controlling religious party in that country, Afghanistan being the country where we have every reason to believe Osama bin Laden, the leader of a huge terrorist network, continues to live in hiding. The Taliban has denied his presence there from time to time, but it is believed by those who follow the activities of his organization that he is in Afghanistan. So we will, of course, be watching that. Let me just... All right, Aaron, I want to go back to you now in New York.
Thank you, Judy. We have on the phone with us New York's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, give us your best piece of information as the situation right now.
The situation right now is the massive rescue effort that's going on right now. We're trying to evacuate thousands and thousands of people. We have as many of our police and fire personnel as we have down in the southern part of Manhattan, evacuating people, trying to save as many lives as possible. We've been in communication with Governor Pataki, who's gotten the National Guard ready, and they're going to come in and relieve us a little bit later in the day. And we've spoken to the White House, and the urban search and rescue teams will come here also to assist us. But right now, it's the New York City Police and Fire, EMS, that are down there trying to evacuate as many people as we possibly can, and we've asked everyone to leave Lower Manhattan if they can on their own so that it relieves our efforts. And this will be going on all day. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy.
It is that. Mr. Mayor, can you tell me, is it are people panicking down there? Or
no,
are they
people.
leaving?
I was, I was there right in a building that got hit by the debris when the first tower collapsed. So I had to evacuate with people, and we were trapped in the building for a while. And we finally were able to get out, and we all walked north. And people, everything that I observed, even though it was hundreds, maybe in some cases thousands of people that were walking on the street, they were orderly, they were calm, they handled themselves really, and probably better than anybody had any right to expect.
And Mr. Mayor, we were told one of the problems, and Lord knows there are hundreds of problems, one of the problems was that a large number of police, fire, EMS personnel have also been injured in this. Can you shed any light on that?
I don't even want to contemplate what the number will be. But when the building collapsed, we had a lot of our police officers and firefighters in the building, and I know many of them because I saw some of them go in because I was there, and I'm praying for them. I just hope they're able to get out.
I think we all are.
The losses to our police department and fire department,
Sir,
are going to be severe.
Do you believe that was there another set of explosions that caused the buildings to collapse, or was it the structural damage caused by the planes?
I don't know. I saw the first collapse and heard the second because I was in a building when the second took place. I think it was structural, but I cannot be sure.
And can you tell us how many hospitals in the city and perhaps outside the city too? All of them.
Right now, at last count, we were utilizing over 50. I think it'll be over 100 by the. And that was as of a half hour ago. And we're utilizing all of the hospitals in New York City. We're utilizing the hospitals in Westchester and Rockland, Nassau County, northern New Jersey. And the main thing we have to urge people to do is to be calm and evacuate Lower Manhattan. And as far as the rest of the city is concerned, just to go about their lives as best as possible. I never thought I would see something like this happen. I got there after the first plane hit and before the second, and watching people jump from the top of the World Trade Center is an unbelievable sight.
Mr. Mayor, my colleague Jeff Greenfield is with us also. Jeff?
Mr. Mayor, in terms of, you've already said that you want Lower Manhattan evacuated, you want everybody else to go about their business. Are there specific instructions that you want to communicate right now to police, fire, everybody else?
Well, police and fire are there, and they're there in large numbers, and they are, first of all, trying to get into the rubble and the debris to save as many people as possible. We also have thousands of police officers in Lower Manhattan, and what we want people to do is to leave Lower Manhattan, if they can, on their own. Just to walk. Sorry. Walk. I just talked to Dick Grasso, who runs the stock exchange, and we have a lot of police there. They have 3,000 people there. We're going to walk them out. We're walking them east and then north, which is essentially the way I walked out. I was right below the World Trade Center when it collapsed, and then we walked up to Greenwich Village. People should walk out of Lower Manhattan, get above Canal Street, for safety reasons, but for a second reason. We need people out of there so we can get thousands of ambulances in and out over the course of the next couple hours. And the fewer people we have there, the more lives we're going to be able to save.
Mr. Mayor, are the subways operating?
The subways are operating outside of Manhattan. Outside of Manhattan, the subways are operating. A couple of delays here and there, but in all other four boroughs, the subways are operating. In Manhattan, there are significant delays. We thought we had the Lexington Avenue open, but it is not. I'm just checking right now. The Lexington Avenue is not open. The A train is working, and people will just have to test and see. The best thing to do right now is to walk. The safest and best thing to do is to walk to your destination. Where schools have remained open, and we've worked with the chancellor to try to make certain that the schools will remain open for as long as they have to help parents with the kids that would be coming home, starting at around 1 or 2 o'clock.
Mr. Mayor, as you know better, the
areas, the governor has mobilized the state in order to make hospitals available to us outside of Manhattan. Any hospital personnel or emergency personnel that want to come in and volunteer, that would be enormously helpful. But the best thing for us to do right now, we're trying to coordinate, is to move people out of the city to hospitals in surrounding areas, which we're actually doing now. So far, though, our hospital system is we're very fortunate to have a gigantic hospital system.
Do they have enough blood? Do they need blood? Do they need people to come in and help them out?
I'm sure they will. We're getting the National Guard to relieve our people by early to late this afternoon. They're being mobilized now. And 3 urban search and rescue teams are going to come to New York City to help us. And then anyone that wants to volunteer from surrounding areas, volunteer fire departments and others, we're working with them now to do that, to try to relieve our fire department.
It's a horrific day, Mr. Mayor.
there's no possible way to begin to describe it.
No, there is not.
To see what happened there is, of course, it makes you very, very angry. It's almost impossible to describe the level of anger that you have that somebody or someone would do something like this. And all of the good and wonderful people that were affected by this. There's no reason for this. There's no excuse for this. And there's something like this. It's just something you never thought you would live to see.
I couldn't agree more, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani on what was to be an election day. The mayor not up for re-election because of term limits, but the election has been postponed. Jeff, just step back for a second.
Well, that's
you talk about anger. And we stand up here and we look at this, and we've all listened to what's been going on now as we've been on the air for 3 hours or so. And there was a woman that Richard Roth interviewed about a half hour ago who said what I suspect most Americans are feeling right now, and some would like to say and can't, how angry she was, how cowardly this all seemed to her. Quickly, we go back to Washington and Judy Woodruff. Judy?
Aaron, government sources telling CNN that President Bush, who had been in Florida for a 2-day trip and who broke that trip off this morning to head back to Washington, will now not return to Washington. Repeating, President Bush will not return to Washington. We do not know where the president will land or whether where his aircraft will go, Air Force One, but we just are passing along this information just as soon as we have it. Again, as we were talking to former NATO head Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, a little while ago, he pointed out that there are contingency plans that the military and the security people have for the president in a situation like this, so we're not going to do any speculating right here about where the president might be going. Joining us now on the telephone, there is some information we want to share with you about aircraft in the sky that is, we're told, is safe right now. We're told by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, they're telling us 50 aircraft are safely in the sky right now, all within about 50 miles of their destination. But in the meantime, we want to talk to Utah Republican Senator Orrin Hatch, who's joining us on the telephones. Senator Hatch, are you there?
Yes, I am.
And I know my colleague Wolf Blitzer, who's here with me in the studio in Washington, had also talked with you. Senator, you've been briefed by what authorities?
Well, I'm on both the Judiciary Committee and also the Intelligence Committee, and I've been briefed by the highest levels of the FBI and of the intelligence community. And I just have to say our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims of this terrible tragedy caused by a bunch of cowards. And there's no justification for what these cowards have done to purely innocent Americans, but I do have some information.
Senator Hatch, this is Wolf Blitzer. Tell us, I spoke with you earlier on the telephone, but tell us precisely what you are now being told in these high-level briefings about those who may, and repeat the word may, have been responsible for these attacks.
You're right. They've come to the conclusion that this looks like the signature of Osama bin Laden and that he may be the one behind this. I think most authorities agree that this is something that we doubt seriously if Iran, Iraq, or Libya would try and do, because they know of the massive response that we'd have to bring down on them. But there was no advance notice at all. They had no way of knowing that this was going to happen. It was carefully planned. And what it means is that it seems to me that if that turns out to be true, we're going to have to revitalize Shah Massoud and the other people in Afghanistan who basically are fighting to get rid of this type of terrorism. And I think we're going to have to ask our friends in Pakistan to get, in turn, to be more cooperative than they have in the past. And then we'd have to work with our allies to have an international strategy to combat this type of international jihad against the West.
We're listening to Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah. We also have joining us on the telephone Senator John McCain from his home in Arizona. Senator McCain, I assume you've been talking to authorities as well.
Yes, Judy, and I'm on Capitol Hill in Washington.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yes. The situation is so serious that words don't describe it. I think that it's clear that the organization and magnitude of the attacks required more than a few people to perpetrate it, and It'll take some time to determine who they are and who supported these attacks, but I think we'll find them out, and they will suffer the full measure of our justice. This is obviously an act of war that's been committed on the United States of America.
What do you mean, obviously, an act of war, Senator McCain?
These attacks clearly constitute an act of war. The unwarranted, unprovoked attacks against innocent American citizens is clearly an act of war, and one that requires that kind of national response and international response.
Senator Orrin Hatch, I believe, is also still with us, Senator. And Senator Hatch, you mentioned the bin Laden organization. Former NATO head General Wesley Clark also said to us about an hour ago in an interview that he believes that it's only the bin Laden organization that is capable of carrying out attacks this coordinated and on this massive a scale. What are you basing your information on?
Well, keep in mind, there are nations that also could carry out these attacks, but I don't think would dare do that, knowing that their signature is going to be figured out. We're going to find out who did this, and we're going after the bastards. It's that simple. And I just have to say that both the FBI and our intelligence community believe that this is a bin Laden signature. And I believe it is. I was the first to point out bin Laden to the Clinton administration and said they're going to kill Americans, and we've got to get on top of that. And I think we're going to have to get on top of it, because this is a cowardly bunch who will stop at nothing to, like you say, have a jihad or a war against the United States, and to do it in the most cowardly fashion.
But Senator McCain, I mean, there will be those who are saying the United States was taking all reasonable precautions. We had security at airports, metal detectors, and so forth and so on. How much more is going to have to be done to prevent something like these things from happening again?
Judy, I don't think our lifestyles will be the same for a long time, since it was before these attacks, as far as use of transportation, particularly airports, are concerned. There have been warnings about whether our security was good enough and whether the proper measures were being taken. I'm sure that'll all be reviewed. By the way, I have no information as to who caused this, and I hesitate to speculate. But I am confident that the President of the United States will lead us, and we will find out who has carried out these acts. And I think it's a little premature to make that determination until we have the hard facts, but I'm sure that we'll get them. The other aspect of this is that it may highlight over time the need for more human intelligence. We have very good technical intelligence capabilities, satellites, etc., but for many years we haven't had the kind of human intelligence which determines motivations before actions are taken.
I'm going to interrupt you, Senator McCain. These are the first pictures we have in. This is from Somerset County, Pennsylvania. This is where the United Airlines flight, I believe it is 176, went down. I'm sorry, I'm correcting. United Airlines 93. This was a Boeing 757 bound from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. It crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, near the town of Shanksville, south of Pittsburgh. We're told about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh in western Pennsylvania. It is not known how many passengers or crew were on board, although initial reports indicated no survivors. Again, these are the first pictures we have coming in from WTAJ there in the Pittsburgh area. United Airlines telling us earlier they had lost this flight, and they knew that it had crashed near Pittsburgh. There is a second United Airlines flight, the Boeing 767, Flight 175, bound from Boston to Los Angeles, has crashed. The airline's still telling us at this point that they do not know where. We don't have information on the number of people aboard. It is possible, but not confirmed, that this would have been the second plane to hit the World Trade Center. Now, again, 2 United Airlines flights, and in addition to American Airlines flights, the Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles. This was a Boeing 767 with 81 passengers on board, 9 crew members, 2 pilots. This is believed to be one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. All 4 of these planes that we're describing to you now, these flights, all headed to California. The second American Airlines Flight 77, this is a Boeing 757, left Dulles Airport near Washington on its way to Los Angeles. It had 58 passengers on board, 4 crew, 2 pilots. This plane unaccounted for. However, a commercial jet was seen crashing into the Pentagon a few hours ago, and it is believed that this could have been the one, but again, not confirmed. So 2 commercial airliners, American Airlines, 2 United Airlines. And I would just add at this point, because to be reassuring to some extent to those of you who are watching, we've been reporting that all flights within the United States have been canceled. There's been a complete hold down on all commercial travel. However, there were planes that were already in the air when these terrible incidents took place this morning. And as of a few moments ago, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, was reporting that there were still 50 aircraft in the skies. Now, some of those may have landed in the last few minutes, but that was the information as of a few minutes ago. All of them were said to be within 50 or so miles of their destination. Now, I'm getting new information in my ear. Now, reporting our congressional correspondent Kate Snow, you're looking at a picture of the Pentagon Live. There's still smoke billowing out of our military command center in the United States. As we look at these pictures, I'm going to turn it over right now to our congressional correspondent Kate Snow, who has with her 2 members of Congress. Kate?
Judy, it's been a bit difficult to get in touch with members of Congress. As we've been reporting, the Capitol has been shut down. You can see it behind me here. You can see that everything's fine there, but it is in a state of lockdown. They've evacuated the Capitol. Joining me here on the roof of a church, I might add, we've managed to get up on the roof here to get a vantage point, is Congressman Curt Weldon, a Republican from Pennsylvania, around the Philadelphia area, not exactly where that video that we just saw, the other end of the state, and also Congressman Ed Schrock from Virginia Beach, from the state of Virginia, also a Republican. You both serve on the Armed Services Committee. In fact, you were in the middle of a briefing. You were about to talk to reporters about the need for more money for our military. Let me start with you, Congressman Weldon. You've been talking to me up here. You've been expressing outrage at all of this. You've been saying this is a failure of the U.S. intelligence system.
It's a failure of our intelligence system. I asked the Sergeant-at-Arms of the Capitol just 45 minutes ago in a meeting with 70 senators and House members, how much advance notice did you have? He said none. There was no intelligence. Our FBI and our CIA are there to intercept raw data. This is a massive operation. And it's a failure that was caused by a lack of resources and by a complacency that set in America over the past 10 years. A complacency that convinced all of us that with the demise of the Soviet Union, there were no more threats. It's a tragedy that it took the loss of thousands of lives to wake this country up and realize that our number one responsibility is not education, and I'm a teacher, and it's not health care, I'm married to a nurse. It is, in fact, the security and the safety of the American people. And today, our government failed the American people.
Congressman Schrock, how much information have you as a member of Congress been able to get? I know that the members have been milling around here trying to get information. Have you been able to get information?
Not a whole lot. The most information we got was when we went to the U.S. Capitol Police headquarters, and they were piecing together what had happened and trying to feed us as they got that, but nothing substantive. It seems like there's no game plan in operation.
Do the two of you know why you were evacuated from the U.S. Capitol?
Absolutely. I talked to Bill Livengood, the Sergeant-at-Arms in the Capitol, and he said, Kurt, we've been told that a plane is taken off from Reagan, and we think it may be heading toward the Capitol. I mean, they've hit our economic center, the World Trade Center, they hit our Pentagon, they hit our State Department. So the obvious next item you'd like to hit is the U.S. Capitol and perhaps the Supreme Court.
And obviously those are unconfirmed reports that any plane, but there were rumors here for a good 2 hours that there were potentially planes headed this direction.
Now we're in total lockdown, as you said, and members are basically scattered around the city, but we're going to get back to work, because we're going to convince these cowards that America doesn't back down, that our government will continue to operate in spite of these terrorist activities.
You said we're at war.
We're at war. We're absolutely at war. This is 21st century war. These are the kinds of activities that we expect from cowards and terrorist groups.
I need to go back to Judy Woodruff now in Washington. Judy?
All right, Kate, thank you. And I want to tell our viewers that we do know now that President Bush has landed near Shreveport, Louisiana, at Barksdale Air Force Base. We're told that he is talking to reporters. There may be a statement from the president, from the White House there on the ground. And one other item here from Washington before I turn it back over to Aaron Brown. In New York, 34 Pentagon victims at least being treated at 3 Washington hospitals. No word on fatalities. Aaron?
Judy, in the area, I guess, of practical information, and we talked to the mayor about this a little bit ago, there is now in New York and in northern New Jersey a critical shortage of blood, a desperate need for blood. We would remind people that giving blood is perfectly safe and on a day like today, absolutely necessary. And so if that's something you can do to help out in the midst of this extraordinary tragedy, you might consider doing that. On the phone with us, James Sanders, who's with Bellevue Hospital, one of the major hospitals here in New York. Mr. Sanders, what can you tell us about the situation there?
Hi, it's Hillary Lane reporting that Mr. Sanders was called back into the command center, but I can fill you in on the briefing that he just gave us. This is the largest emergency and trauma unit in New York City and the second largest emergency unit in the country. They say they are underutilized right now, while the hospitals downtown closer to the Trade Center are absolutely overwhelmed. So they have put out a call to EMS saying, bring people in here. It is an emergency call. What I have seen at this point are some patients staggering and being helped in, nobody in apparently critical condition. The hospital tells us that they've had 65 minor injuries. Those are broken bones, internal injuries, smoke inhalation cases. There have been 10 major
Hillary, I need to interrupt you.
One person brought in.
Hillary, I need to interrupt you. This is a Taliban spokesman talking now in Kabul, I believe. This is coming to us by video phone from Afghanistan. And I am not hearing, and perhaps you guys are, but I am not hearing him.
We should remind our viewers that Afghanistan was one of the sites that was hit 3 years ago by the United States.
The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan has already explicitly said its standpoint or its position about terrorism.
The terrorism ټول انواع او ډولونه لکه څنګه چې په افغانستان کې هم ورانه پیش کړي دي او دلته موږ همیشه د تروریزم ښکار شوي یو دلته موږ غندلې دي او په نړیوال سطح باندې هم د دې غندنه کوو.
We have criticized all forms of criticism as Afghanistan has itself faced and has become the victim of terrorism, and we are now criticizing the fact.
Terrorism یو ویرونکې داراچونکې او نفرت پېښونکې لاره ده.
Terrorism is a terrifying and hateful hatred or hateful method.
او دغه پیښه چې سوي د بشري پلوه خورا پراخه او لوی ناورین دی.
And this incident is from the humanitarian point of view surely a very vast and very terrifying incident.
Any question?
Any question?
Question, please. Have you received any kind of information, any kind of communication from the United States or any other organization?
The America Mutahida Ayalati یا لومړی قانون کوم رابطه بشته سره
نه تر اوسه پورې چا کومه رابطه نه ده کړې او اوس تر ټولو مهمه خبره ده چې هغوی په ژغورنه باندې اخته دي کېدای شي چې یوازې هغوی ته د تسلیت پیغامونه تللي وي او دا چې اسلامي امارت سره چا تماس نه ولري دا خبره تر اوسه نه ده.
No contact up to now. They might be busy or surely they are busy in the rescue operation. So they need condolence, but up to now, no communication from him.
Does the Taliban categorically condemn these attacks on the United States?
Taliban په مرحله واره توګه د امریکا باندې دغه حملې وکړي.
موږ د توریزم ټول انواع همیشه غندلې د پخوا څخه په دې باره کې پالیسي ښکاره وه.
Our policy was very clear from the very beginning, and we have criticized, and even now we criticize terrorism in all its forms.
Can you rule out any involvement by Osama bin Laden?
Osama bin Laden last year, no, up till now, no one has blamed or accused him formally.
The Taliban have said that they will maintain Mr. bin Laden without communication, unable to communicate. Can you be convinced at this time that your policy of keeping him without communication has been effective in recent months?
طالبان رجمانه کړی و چې اسامه بن لادن سره د هر قسم ته اتصالاتي امکانات بدلون لري. تاسو دا خبره تاییدوئ چې اوس هم هغه پالیسي کې باندې عملي ده؟
موږ په پالیسي کې تغیر نه راغلی.
No change in our policy in this regard.
Do you think the policy is working?
او دا پالیسي کار هم کوي؟ مسئله کړی ده؟
کدی خبره ده. Suspicions obviously turn to Osama bin Laden. In the media, he's been mentioned as possibly having a hand in this. Are you concerned that Afghanistan could be on the receiving end of recriminations of reprisals, of responding back?
توجه یا ګمان ته راوړي مطبوعاتو یا میډیا د نوم هم اخیسته ده او تدریس او توقع کوي چې افغانستان د دې اسلام الوي یا د اسلام الهدف وګرځي.
فکر کوم چې دا غنوم اخته هم جواز به د فقاهه چې څنګه په هغه تفسیر کې د نوم راځي خلا مخسوي.
I think that even if someone has taken his name in the media, it might be just because his name was repeatedly mentioned in the past in the comments. Just for this reason, his name might have been repeated.
Just the second half of the question, though, are you concerned that Afghanistan could receive this prize attack?
We don't see or foresee any difficulty in this regard because there is no argument or no reason for it.
If it were to happen, if there were to be attacks, what would the implications be of such a situation?
If there were attacks from...
As Jonathan said, if there were to be reprisals against Afghanistan, what would the implications of that be?
محمد ټول ټول انواع تروریزم هغه په دولتي شکل باندې کچیر یو هیواد بل هیواد ولې طبعا هغه دولتي تروریزم.
It is a little bit earlier to say at this stage, but as we said that we criticize all forms of criticism. So if Afghanistan is attacked, then we can call it state terrorism.
There's also been concerns expressed about Arab mercenary fighters in Afghanistan and allegations that there may be an Arab connection. These acts of terrorism have also been raised. Can you talk to those concerns? Can you rule out any Arab links?
Afghanistan की अरबी अखबार या बाज़ ग्रुपों چې له دنیا خطر احساسوي تاسو دې یو لاس لودنه په دې کې هم راځوي.
زه فکر کوم چې دا پیښه ډېره لو پیښه ده او دا به داسې چا پسې مسؤل چې زړه ته مو نه لګېږي چې دا کار وکړي. دا به کېدای شي چې یو ناانصافي وي یو څوم تخمین ونی.
It is a very big and enormous incident. So just to connect it with some people that even one's logic cannot even accept it. So in my opinion, it might not be a justified.
Mr. Madhukil, are you surprised that the United States has received this sort of attack?
The American federal چې د دې حملاتو هدف وګرځي تاسو دې باندې حیران شئ.
د دې خبر ده چې د خپل نوې دا پیښه کېدای شي د امریکا په تاریخ کې ډېره لویه پیښه وي. د هر چا لپاره طبیعي خبر د حیرانۍ وړ ده.
Naturally, because this might be the only and the unique kind of incident in the history of the United States. So, like anyone is also...
What I'm getting at is, do you think the United States has perhaps invited this, given its policies around the world and the growing resentment that some forces feel towards the United States? So what I'm suggesting is that the United States is
the Taliban official in Kabul. The relevance here, of course, is that the United States government has blamed the Afghani government for harboring Osama bin Laden, who may or may not be responsible for the events that have happened here in the country today, and therefore the Taliban response. The president, who was in Sarasota, Florida, when President Bush, when the first attack on the Trade Center took place, issued a statement then. He left Sarasota. He is not going back to the White House, at least not yet, but he has told reporters, quote, "We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Make no mistake," said the president, "the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts." The president said the U.S. military has been put on a high alert status and said he had taken security precautions to ensure the government continues to function. And as we said, the president at this moment is not going back to Washington. He has been taken elsewhere for his own safety. There is no reason, by the way, at this point to believe there are continuing threats, but that doesn't mean there aren't any, and the Secret Service is taking no chances, and we can't recall anything even approaching that. We also have a report coming out of London from the Associated Press that followers of Osama bin Laden had warned 3 weeks ago that they would carry out a huge and unprecedented attack on U.S. interests. That, according to a London-based Arab journalist, he adds, they said it would be huge and unprecedented, but did not specify what it was, and we will not assume that this is what it was, but obviously a lot of people are wondering. Joining us on the phone, Richard Holbrooke, former American ambassador to the United Nations, Robert Gates, former head of the CIA, and they join us. Mr. Gates, let me start with you, because I suspect that millions of Americans right now are asking, how could something like this happen? How could it happen?
I think we have to start by acknowledging that we've been both fortunate and capable in the past. This is not the first major attack like this that has been planned. Several years ago, there was a plot to bring down 11 American jumbo jets in Asia that the FBI and U.S. intelligence thwarted, and there have been some other major attacks. So I think that when you have a free and open country as we do, we are vulnerable to this sort of thing, and it is the face of this term that people have been talking about for several years of asymmetric warfare, and it is a way of getting at us, the most powerful military nation in the world, in ways in which we're vulnerable.
Sir, we heard, and perhaps it's given our proximity to the events, it's a little bit unseemly, but we heard a member of Congress but a few minutes ago essentially say that the American government failed its people. Is it fair to say that this is a failure, or we just can't know it all?
Well, personally, I believe that for people to start blaming people and organizations at this point is highly premature. I think that we need to find out just exactly how bad this situation is and deal with it. The idea of starting to cast blame within hours of something having happened is in fact unseemly.
And Ambassador Holbrooke, does the United States in a situation like this go it alone, or does it gather the international community together as one, or as much of one as it can, and try and respond in that form?
Well, first of all, let me say that at this moment, we have to find out what happened down there. I used to work in that building and was there when it was attacked a few years ago. I know that area. My assistant has a cousin who's now missing in the building, and my thoughts are first for the enormous, unbelievable loss of life and tragedy that's going on in Lower Manhattan. Beyond that, Aaron, on your question, this requires a unified international response by all the key member states of the world community. including, very importantly, Russia. And as for the interview you just broadcast by the foreign minister from the Taliban, let's be clear on his attempts to disassociate himself from Osama bin Laden. We don't know at this point who did this, but it was well coordinated and done with a degree of skill which exceeds anything. I think Bob Gates will know better than me, but I think, Bob, this is the most skillful, murderous attack ever in terms of coordination. And I want to be very clear on this. Bin Laden himself, as you just suggested, Bin Laden has said that the Taliban leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar, is the true spiritual leader of the Muslim world. He said that Afghanistan is the purified Islamic State equivalent to Mecca and Medina. And in a tape that the New York Times wrote about 2 days ago, he urged Muslims everywhere, and I'm quoting the New York Times, to migrate to Afghanistan to support the Taliban, saying it's their duty to God, and saying there's now finally a Muslim state that destroys falsehoods and does not succumb to the American infidel and is led by the true believer, Mullah Muhammad Omar, and so on and so forth. So what I want to stress here is that any nation, and this goes for the Taliban and their henchmen in Afghanistan, any nation in the world that harbored anyone associated with this must be treated as though they were part of what is effectively an act of war against the United States. And they cannot hide behind the traditional definitions of difficulty. In the past, we've tried to get Osama bin Laden. He's evaded capture. He almost got killed by a bombing raid 2 or 3 years ago. And I think starting with Afghanistan, we're going to have to hold everyone accountable on the who might have sheltered anyone associated with this act.
So we don't simply, in this conversation, we don't simply hold the group itself, whoever it is, the group itself accountable. We hold anyone accountable, any country, any government accountable if they did nothing to stop it.
Any country which shelters, abates, or helps these people and their cohorts evade capture and the retribution they deserve is, in my view, functionally culpable of the events that took place in New York and Washington and elsewhere today, and must be so warned. I'm not accusing the Taliban specifically at this point because we don't know who did it.
Correct.
But all the evidence points to a connection between Osama bin Laden and Taliban leaders, and an attempt on the Taliban's part to, as the New York Times put it 2 days before this attack, call it as a ploy. And that is a quote from the New York Times before this happened. So I just want to underscore again, we are going to need the support of all our allies in Europe, the Russians, the Chinese, and any other country that might have in the past flirted with playing both sides of the street. Nothing like this has happened in American history. The full dimensions of it are still not clear to anyone, but I think we all can imagine it's going to be heart-wrenching in its dimensions as it becomes fully apparent, and we're not going to be able to leave countries playing two sides here. And I'm sure my friend Bob Gates would not disagree with that.
Let me, Mr. Gates, I want to come back to you. Mr. Holbrooke, stay with us for a minute. I believe now we have the president. This is the president on tape a few moments ago. Well, obviously we're having a technical problem. Let me just tell you what, again, the president said in what has been his second statement. His first statement came after the first attacks here in New York. Short time ago, the president said, "We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people." He added, "We make no mistake," said the president, "the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible." I think we're going to try and hear the president again. Here we go. Yeah. This is coming to us from the broadcast pool. It's traveling with the president. Obviously, it's a very chaotic day, as you can imagine. A horrible tragedy has taken place, and people are working very hard to get stuff done and get it done right. And obviously, the pool is having trouble feeding the tape. But again, the president said, make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. Cowardly acts, I think it's fair to say we don't quite have our arms around the magnitude of it all.
I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested, but make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
President Bush, a short time ago, in his second remarks of the day, the president initially was headed back to the White House, and a security decision was made to divert the flight. And so the president will not go back to Washington, at least not yet. When he will return, perhaps John King can tell us. Our senior White House correspondent joins us now. John? John, are you there?
Yes, I am, Aaron. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do. I hear you fine. Do you have any word on when the president will come back?
No, we do not. As you reported, we were told earlier in the day the number one priority was the president's safety. The number two priority was to get him back to the White House because they believe that would send a powerful political statement. But as the president was on his way back from Florida, we are told by sources a security decision was made that at this time not to bring him back to Washington. So he was brought, and we won't disclose his exact location for security reasons. He was brought to one of several military installations in the United States that is equipped, we are told, with a very sophisticated command and control bunker, very much like the equipment that would be available to the president here at the White House in the White House Situation Room. We are also told that national security team members are still in the White House Situation Room, and earlier today, at least as of a little more than an hour ago, Vice President Cheney as well, directing operations and monitoring things from there. But the president obviously deciding not to come directly back to Washington. We are told that is for security reasons, delivering the statement you just heard. He has been in touch with congressional leaders, and we are told leadership members of the U.S. Congress are also being taken to an undisclosed location for their security. So we're trying to get more information on that, and we will bring that to you as soon as we have it. Aaron.
John, thanks. Senior White House correspondent John King. Peter Bergen, CNN's Peter Bergen has been tracking the government of Afghanistan for some time, and he was listening in a few moments ago when the Taliban spokesman was speaking. Peter, first of all, what did you hear? Was there anything that perhaps the rest of us might not have heard, any nuance in what you heard? Why don't you start there?
Well, we just heard from the Foreign Minister, Wakil Mutawakil, who's, relatively speaking, a moderate of the Taliban movement. He basically repeated what I think is a standard Taliban line. We've heard it for the past at least couple of years. which is that Osama bin Laden isn't a terrorist and that he's being contained by the Taliban and that he's not able to conduct political or military missions. This, unfortunately, is really a false statement since Osama bin Laden has been fingered by both Yemeni and U.S. authorities for the bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen in October 2000. There isn't an indictment there yet. The FBI continues to investigate, but senior Yemeni officials and senior U.S. officials have said that he's the primary suspect. So we've seen that bin Laden was able to bomb 2 U.S. embassies in Africa in '98 within 9 minutes of each other. We've seen that bin Laden was able to blow a huge hole in the side of one of the most sophisticated warships in the U.S. Navy, the USS Cole in Yemen in October of last year. And unfortunately, he must be top of the list of the person sophisticated enough in terms of operations to bring off these kinds of terrible disasters we've seen today. If you're looking for who is the most likely suspect, he has to be it. You've got an operation in which several people appear to commit suicide. You've also got an operation in which people obviously had some skill in piloting planes. These are clearly attributes of his organization. We know that he has pilots in his organization. We've seen in several instances his members of his organization commit suicide in attacks. We've also seen a pattern of warnings in previous bin Laden attacks in which this fits. 9 weeks before the U.S. embassy bombings in Africa in August of '98, bin Laden held a press conference in Afghanistan talking about, quote, good news in coming weeks. A few months before the USS Cole was bombed in Yemen, a videotape circulated around the Middle East in which bin Laden was wearing a Yemeni dagger, which he's never done in previous photographs, and one of his number 2 called for attacks on U.S. targets in Yemen. Just recently, there's been a videotape floating around the Middle East in which bin Laden, a very confident bin Laden, calls for attacks on the United States, says that the victory of Yemen, referring to the USS Cole attack, will continue. People that I've talked to are familiar with the bin Laden organization, said that the threats on this tape were very serious, that there was an imminent attack in the works. I spoke to somebody who was familiar with the organization a few weeks ago who made those statements to me. I had been very concerned about a potential attack as a result of this tape. It fits with the modus operandi, which is to talk about potential attacks coming up relatively soon without being particularly specific.
Peter, let me just interrupt you for a second. Our senior analyst, Jeff Greenfield, is here, and Jeff has a question. Jeff, go ahead.
Hi, Peter. If I'm not mistaken, you actually interviewed Osama bin Laden some years ago, correct?
Yeah, in '97 for CNN.
Now, at that time, what did he say about the notion of targeting civilians? I mean, what is the rationale behind targeting civilians for death and destruction?
Well, at that time, Jeff, he told us that because of the American military presence in the Middle East, that he was calling for attacks on U.S. soldiers. Now, he said if American civilians got in the way, that was sort of their problem. So at that time in '97, he was really only calling for attacks on American military targets. Later, that position evolved. By '98, he was calling for attacks on all Americans, whether civilian or military. I think the rationale behind that thinking is that, in his view, if you're an American taxpayer, you're subsidizing the anti-Islamic, quote, activities that he's against, whether that's in Saudi Arabia, with the American military presence there, or with America's support for Israel in the ongoing intifada. Jeff.
Peter, thank you for your work today. I suspect we'll get back to you, but we appreciate the background, which I think gives us some context for why the focus is again on bin Laden. But we should add that as we talk to you now, we can't be certain. We do not know that that's who is behind what has happened. What we do know is an extraordinary national tragedy has taken place, that someone is responsible, that the American government has promised to hunt down and punish, the president's words a short time ago, hunt down and punish whoever is responsible.
Do we have Director Gates still on the phone?
No, I don't believe
I guess we do not. Because the question, obviously, we've already heard it with General Clark and at least one of the congressmen asking the question, how can an agency with an estimated budget of $26.5 billion a year not have known this? I think that's the first of many such questions we're going to be hearing.
Sandy Berger, who worked national security in the Clinton administration, and Richard Holbrooke, the former UN ambassador, back on the phone with us. Mr. Berger, give me a sense of what is going on in Washington right now. Who are the players at the table? Where is the table? And what are they doing?
Well, obviously the President of the United States is at the head of the table no matter where he is. But others around that table include the Secretary of Defense and Attorney General, head of the FBI, the National Security Advisor, Secretary of State, because this may obviously involve international matters. I think we, in the midst of our outrage and indignation, we have to stay focused and stay determined here. The first job in this situation is rescue and to deal with what must be thousands of people here who are in peril. This is, in the first instance, a massive rescue operation. In the second instance, it's a security operation. We don't know what else may be part of this multifaceted operation. A number of precautions have been taken in the last few hours, and we have to obviously lock down as much as we can. And then the focus becomes detection. And I think that given the magnitude of this, given the fact that this has obviously involved multiple points of origin in the United States, it is inconceivable to me that we will not know relatively quickly when the dust settles who is responsible for this.
Now, Mr. Holbrooke, Ambassador Holbrooke, what has happened today is extraordinary. Give it a kind of historical context, the enormity of what's taken place.
Well, I think your coverage has made it more clear than anything else, although despite the superb efforts you've made, it hasn't yet become fully evident to your viewers what would be evident to any of us like myself who worked in the World Trade Center. I was there in the last bombing, as I mentioned earlier. That the number of people in that area, including the Chambers Street subway stop, which goes right under the World Trade Center, means that the dimensions of it exceed by a factor of probably 100 any previous incident, including Oklahoma City and the previous World Trade Center in American history. And one must be ready for news that will be very, very grim indeed for all of us as individuals who will have friends and relatives there, and for all Americans. And there will be additional consequences. This is the financial center of the world. The buildings in that area, all of which have now been evacuated, whose infrastructures may be threatened by gas and electrical line degradation, could affect, at least temporarily, the financial markets as well, although I would leave that to Treasury, and Sandy Berger listed the people at the table. I'm not sure if Sandy mentioned the Treasury Secretary, but I'm sure the Treasury and the Fed are well aware of the implications of orderly movement and capital transfers. Now, looking beyond that, Aaron, I think we have to go back to the fact that everyone has talked about the possibility of this kind of thing for a long time, and we faced lesser but similar attempts. This exceeded, apparently, the expectations of the intelligence experts, and we will learn more about that in the weeks to come. But I need to underscore one point. To find the people responsible is going to take a unified international effort. No one nation, not even the United States, can do it on its own. And we must have the full cooperation of the Russians, of the states in the Middle East, because I think the assumption that that's the region where this was planned is pretty solid. And I repeat this again, any nation that is seen to have harbored or abetted or sheltered any of these people must be treated as co-equally responsible. They cannot hide behind the facade we just saw in the remarks of the Taliban foreign minister. And Peter Bergen's extraordinarily insightful explanation a few minutes ago on CNN, I think, is the first real glimpse into that the viewers have had into how dangerous this is. If the Taliban shelters Osama bin Laden, as they do, and if Osama bin Laden is responsible for this, as I think almost everyone is going to suspect, then the Taliban must be held equally responsible for what has happened today.
Jeff? And Ambassador Holbrooke, what can, I would like you to be specific. What does that mean? Are you talking about a retaliatory strike against Afghanistan?
Yeah, that's Jeff.
It's Jeff Greenfield. I'm sorry,
Hi, Jeff. No.
Is that what you mean? That if put the links together?
No, Jeff. Let me be very frank, and I don't want to lapse into bloody-minded verbal excesses at a moment of high emotion. But let's be very blunt about this. If a country or regime, the Taliban, or some other regime to be determined by the intelligence community, has sheltered people who played a role in this, they cannot hide behind the attributes of they didn't know it, they had nothing to do with it. They must cooperate in the pursuit of the people responsible. And since the Taliban, a leader, has been publicly proclaimed by Osama bin Laden as the present spiritual leader of the Muslim world. I'm referring to bin Laden's declaration that Mullah Muhammad Omar is the rightful leader of the spiritual leader of the Muslim world, something he said on tape, quoted by John Burns in the New York Times 2 days ago. And if, in fact, these people are in some degree of collusion, I personally believe, and I'm only speaking for myself here, I personally believe that the Taliban should be regarded as co-equally responsible for this, and therefore, if and when we consider military action, it is fully justified, and the Taliban should face the same consequences.
Ambassador, thank you. Just quickly, if we can, one last question to Sandy Berger. When you were at the table, in honesty, did you ever anticipate the magnitude, an attack of this magnitude, which has taken place, just to remind people, not just in this city, in New York, not just in the capital, Washington, but on a number of airliners flying across the country as well? Was the planning that broad? Was the fear that great?
Well, I think for some time we have known that we are vulnerable to a serious attack. A multiple attack was thwarted, as you recall, during the Millennium New Year. But I think this, certainly exceeds in scope anything that intelligence community anticipated, and is as I said, an extraordinarily sophisticated operation to carry out something like this from various sites in the United States relatively simultaneously without detection. Whoever has perpetrated this has declared war on the United States, and we will have to respond accordingly. But I would also caution here that we should be careful about jumping to certitude about what happened here. We'll know this soon enough, and we'll also be able to find out why this was not detected.
I think that's just an extraordinarily important point, that what is going on right now at this moment is more important than why it happened. And what is going on is you have thousands of people, we presume in a number of different places, whose lives are at risk, who have been hurt, who need to be rescued, who need to be treated, who need to be taken to hospitals. In New York, in northern New Jersey, where the bulk of the injured are being treated here, there is a critical shortage of blood. Hospital officials are desperately seeking help there. And as Mr. Berger said, time enough later to figure out who and how we deal with it. Ambassador Holbrooke, Sandy Berger, thank you both for joining us. William Rodriguez, I just was looking down. There are literally down below us on by Madison Square Garden, which is where we're located, hundreds, perhaps thousands of people on the corner, and they are just looking out. And from where they are, they can't see very much but the smoke. And I can't tell you if something has happened, but and it's lunch hour here, and there's just a lot of people, as there have been all morning, looking at a street that is almost empty. As New York, the southern part of New York, Penn Station by the Garden, essentially being evacuated to allow emergency crews to get to the scene. William Rodriguez is a maintenance worker at the Trade Center, I believe. In any case, he's on the phone with us now. Mr. Rodriguez, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Tell me where you were when... Well, which of the two buildings were you in?
I work on the building 1, the one that got hit the first time.
Tell me what happened.
I was on the basement, which is a support floor for the maintenance company, and we hear like a big rumble, not like an impact, like a rumble, like something like moving furniture on a massive way, and all of a sudden we hear another rumble, and a guy comes running into our office, and all his skin was off his body. All his skin, we went crazy. We started screaming. We told him to get out. We took everybody out of the office outside to the loading dock area, and then I went back in, and when I went back in, I saw people, I heard people that were stuck on an elevator, on a freight elevator, because all the elevators went down, and water was going in, and they were probably getting drowned. And we get a couple of pipes and opened the elevator, and we got the people out. I went back up, and I saw one of the officers from the Port Authority Police. I've been working there for 20 years, so I knew him very well. My routine on the World Trade Center is in charge of the staircase. And since there was no elevator service, I have the master key for all the staircase doors. So I went up with the police officer and a group of firemen. As we went up, there was a lot of people coming down, and while we got, it was very difficult to get up.
Mr. Rodriguez, how much time has elapsed here in this, as you recount the events? Did it seem like hours, minutes, seconds?
No, it wasn't hours.
But what did it seem like?
Well, there was a big time, like a gap. There was a gap of time. I won't be able to tell you if it was 15, 20 minutes, but it was a gap of time. We heard while we were on the 33rd floor, on the 27th floor, because we stopped there with the fire department because the equipment was very heavy and they were breathing very hard. They took a break because they couldn't continue going up, so they wanted to take a break.
Yeah.
And we have a person on a wheelchair that we were going to bring down on a gurney, and a lady that was having a problem with a heart attack. And some other guy that was breathing hardly. And we went a couple of floors up while they were putting the person in the gurney, got up to the 39th floor, and we heard on the radio that the 65th floor collapsed.
Right,
It collapsed.
Mr. Rodriguez, let me stop you there at the 65th floor. And let me add, you're a lucky man, it seems like today. Thank you for joining us. Matt Cornelius, you were on the 64th floor, 65th floor?
65th floor. Yeah, that's where I work.
Tell me what happened.
Well, I arrived at work a little bit early today.
What do you do?
And I work for the Port Authority in the aviation department. And I was just putting my stuff away, and all of a sudden we heard a loud crash. And the building started shaking, kind of moving like a wave.
What did you think was happening?
I had no idea. I mean, we figured either an airplane had hit it or our first instinct was airplane. And everyone started screaming and said, move away from the windows and let's get out of here. And we saw debris fall past the window on the north side.
How much, just to help our viewers kind of orient themselves, you're on the 65th floor of a building that is how many stories?
I believe it's 110.
So 50 stories above you this has taken place.
I imagine so. Okay. We really had no idea at all what had happened until we exited the building. I mean, I had no idea the magnitude. Just took the stairs. I believe I actually was in the stairs as that same man because I remember I saw the person in the wheelchair. We made it pretty fast down to 40th floor, and then from there the smoke got a little bit thick and it was a lot slower. We maybe made a floor about every 2 minutes.
And how many people are in this group with you?
Well, there was just one other person that I worked with that was with us. It was packed. I mean, it was a virtual traffic jam in the staircase, up and down, I guess. It was very full.
People screaming?
No, actually, everyone maintained calm really well. I was impressed with that. I think for some people it brought back memories of the bombing. People had been there before when that happened. But I was amazed, really. We got in the stairway, we were moving down. When the fire department were coming up, they said, move to the left. Everyone moved to the left, and everyone complied. A couple people started crying a little bit, but we said we're going to get out of here. We just got to focus and take it one step at a time.
Was it noisy, or was there screaming?
No, it was.
Was it quiet? Was it eerie?
It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't quiet. I mean, people were talking. In fact, someone was laughing. I kept hearing that, and I thought that was strange. But it was pretty normal. I mean, it wasn't. We didn't know what was going on. I mean, all we knew was something major had happened. Exactly, but we didn't really understand the full severity of the situation. So people weren't panicking. Once we got down to they put us on the plaza level, which was disturbing because there was a lot of debris in the plaza level and a lot of carnage, basically. We then moved out the back towards Broadway, and they said the police were saying, "Don't look back, don't look back." And, of course, I made about a half a block, and I looked back, and I saw the other tower on fire, and I couldn't believe it. And
Were you terrified?
Yeah. When we were stuck in that stairway, I mean, we stopped every now and then. It started to get nervous. But we never had any fear of the building collapse. I mean, we had no idea what was going on. So once I got out, and it's still sinking in, the real full severity of it, I mean, it's just an awful thing.
That's true of everybody.
Yeah. So,
lucky man.
I am very lucky. I thank God very much.
Just all your money. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Very much. Thank you. In Washington, D.C., thank you, Matt, they have declared a state of emergency. Do we have a guest there, or... Okay. Washington has declared Washington, D.C. a state of emergency. I believe I was just told that the Space Needle in Seattle has been closed down. Is that correct? Did I hear you guys? There are a couple of points we might make there. Back in the year 2000, just before New Year's Eve, coming into Washington State, a man was stopped with explosives, and as it turned out, that was a part of a planned terrorist attack, and it caused the city of Seattle to shut down what had been an enormously elaborate Millennium celebration. They are very much on edge in Seattle. We were just there last week, and it's not surprising to me that they would shut that building down. Elise Marcos is an official with New York City Hospitals, and he joins us now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you okay.
I apologize for the stuttered introduction. Tell me the situation in the hospitals.
Well, at Bellevue Hospital, which is the largest public hospital in the city, and is relatively near the incident, we have, as of now, received approximately 125, 30 patients. 2 are dead, unfortunately. Some have brain injuries, very serious fractures, and we are now getting more patients from other hospitals that need microsurgery or implantation of limbs and plastic surgery. So it is a rather overwhelming situation here.
Mr. Marcos, you were outside the buildings in that period between the planes hitting and the buildings collapsing. Can you tell me what you saw?
Well, as president of the public hospitals, I was asked immediately within seconds to join the crisis assistance unit, which is located across the street from the World Trade Center. So I drove there, and as I was parking, a huge piece of rock hit the back of the car, broke the windshield where I was sitting, so I'm very lucky to be alive. Then when I went to the center was evacuated because they were afraid that a second plane may be coming. I joined the fire commissioner, and then I needed to use the telephone because cellular phones were not working. I went into, I think, American Express building, and as I was there, one of the buildings collapsed, and we were unable to leave that building. And thanks to a very brave police officer who was able to find an exit, we are here today.
Mr. Marcos, we heard reports that people were jumping out of the building. Did you see that?
Unfortunately, I saw about 5 people jumping from up the building, and I can tell you there's no other. I've never had such an overwhelming and terrible experience in my life. Although I've been in this job for a long time and I've seen a lot of things, it's just something that is very hard to describe. But at the same
police officer Lim, I know he didn't make it because as I came out of the building, I saw a lot of bodies on the floor. I saw a lady encrusted on the floor. That's probably one of the persons that jumped from the building, if he jumped from the building. But it was like he melted on the floor. That's how bad it was. As I came out of the building, we hear the rumbling, and I was told, run. When I look up, everything is coming down, and I start running as far as I could, and we all jumped under one of the fire trucks, right on time, because everything just came right on top of us. We could have been crushed because the truck was coming down on us, and all of a sudden it stopped, and we were pulled out from under the truck. But I know these officers didn't make it.
Mr. Marcos, Mr. Martinez, thank you for your extraordinary descriptions of what was going on in and around the buildings, excuse me, around 9 o'clock this morning, a little before 9 and a little after 9 here in New York. We've heard a number of references today. Certainly the first thing we thought of as we were coming in to the February 93 attack on the World Trade Center. And as horrible as that was, and it was, 6 people died that day. Many hundreds were injured, but 6 people perished. It is not reasonable to believe that the numbers will be anything like that. They will be far, far worse. And I think we're just beginning to get a sense of the magnitude. CNN's Judy Woodruff in Washington. Judy?
Aaron, we're listening to your reporting and the people you've been talking with. I have to say in stunned silence, none of us ever seen anything close to the magnitude of this horrific events of this morning. Just to quickly recap, 4 commercial airplanes in the United States, 2 United Airlines, 2 American Airlines, have crashed. We know 2 of them went into, and you can see the flights here, American Airlines Flight 11 leaving Boston on the way to Los Angeles. This is one of the planes, American Airlines 77 Dulles to Los Angeles. That plane, that second plane, believed to have crashed into the Pentagon, but again, that's not confirmed. The first American Airlines flight believed to have crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. United Airlines Flight 93 leaving Newark on the way to San Francisco, believed to have crashed in Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. And finally, another United Airlines flight believed to have crashed into the World Trade Center. In all, horrific, not just damage, but surely loss of life. It's far too early to know victims, the number of victims, the number of casualties. We do have some information we want to share with you. In addition to what you're seeing in New York City, one of those planes, as we said, crashed into the Pentagon. We're going to be taking you there in a moment to our correspondent, Bob Franken. But we want to let you know what we're learning, what our correspondents are learning, that in the last little while, 5 battleships, some of them destroyers, we know have left Norfolk and have moved out of port in order to be deployed for security reasons along the east coast of the United States. In addition, 2 aircraft carriers that were based in Norfolk, in the Norfolk area, have been moved out to sea and on their way to New York, to the New York area. Now, we don't have much more information than that. We were originally told they were just leaving port for safety reasons, for security reasons. We're now told that very specifically the mission of the aircraft carriers is to move into the New York area. The mission of the battleships to be deployed along the East Coast. And, of course, as we get more information, we'll share that with you. As I turn to Bob Franken at the Pentagon, I just want to tell you President Bush, we can tell you now, has been at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. He's now leaving that site on his way to an undisclosed location. Authorities telling us that they will not tell us where he is headed. Secretary of State Powell, the same story there, on his way back to the United States from a conference in Peru to an undisclosed location, and leaders of the United States Congress, both parties and both houses of Congress, moved to an undisclosed location. Now to our correspondent at the Pentagon, Bob Franken, who is, I believe, at a safe distance there from what's been going on. Bob, please bring us up to date.
Well, we're on the east side of the Pentagon, as you can see, Judy, and you can see over my shoulder that smoke continues to billow, smoke that is sometimes thick, sometimes a little dissipated, but we're talking about 4.5 hours after a plane, it is described as probably being a jumbo jet-sized plane, crashed into the Pentagon about 9:20 this morning. We now want to show you what it looks like on the west side. This is video that was shot by Vito Maggiola, who is an assignment editor and producer for CNN, who was able to get video. You can see that firefighters there are fighting in an area, rings 4, 5, and 6, on the west side of the Pentagon. Vito says that it was an area, in his estimation, that was about 30 yards wide and about 10 yards deep into the building. The firefighting was hampered, he says, because inside the building, sprinklers, standpipes, other forms of hydrants were damaged. There's an estimate that several hundred firefighters and emergency workers are there at the Pentagon. We're also told, of course, that there have been evacuation efforts throughout the day. We can see those. We do not have an estimate on the number of casualties. I can tell you that from our vantage point, we have seen a constant parade of casualty units, military casualty units, civilian ambulances, fire engines, and the like going to the Pentagon. There, of course, have been casualties, but as I said, we don't have any sort of estimate about that now. Now, we do also have somebody to talk with us who was an eyewitness to the actual crash. He was watching from Arlington, Virginia, which is a suburb over. His name is Tim Timmerman. Mr. Timmerman, are you with us right now?
I sure am.
You're a pilot. Tell us what you saw.
Well, I was looking out the window. I live on a 16th floor overlooking the Pentagon and the corner apartment, so I have quite a panorama. And being next to National Airport, I hear jets all the time, but this jet engine I heard was way too loud. I looked out to the south, to the southwest, and it came right down 395, right over Columbia Pike. And as it went by the Sheraton Hotel, the pilot added power to the engines. I heard it spool up a little more. And then I lost it behind a building, and then it came out, and I saw it hit right in front of it. It didn't appear to crash into the building. Most of the energy was dissipated and hitting the ground. But I saw the nose break up, I saw the wings fly forward, and then the conflagration just engulfed everything in flames. It was horrible.
What can you tell us about the plane itself?
It was a Boeing 757, American Airlines, no question.
You say that there was a Boeing, and you say it was a 757 or 767. It's hard.
757.
757,
yeah,
which
American
of course is
Airlines.
American Airlines, one of the new generation of jets, and of
right.
course,
it was not. It was so close to me. It was like looking out my window and looking at the helicopter. It was just right there.
We were told that it was. We were told that it was flying so low that it clipped off a couple of light poles on its way in.
That might have happened behind the apartments that occluded my view, and when it reappeared, it was right before impact. And like I said, I saw the airplane disintegrate and then just blow up into a huge ball of flames.
So there was a fireball that you saw.
Absolutely, and the building shook, and it was, quite a tremendous explosion.
What did you see after that?
Nothing but the flames, and I sat here and I took a few pictures out my window, and I noticed the fire trucks, and the response was just wonderful. Fire trucks were there quickly. I saw the area. The building didn't look very damaged initially, but I do see now, looking out my window, there's quite a chunk in it. But I think the blessing here might have been that the airplane hit before it hit the building, hit the ground. A lot of energy might have gone that way. That's what it appeared like.
Well, there is, of course, we've heard some discussion about the fact that it could have been worse had it actually gone a little bit higher and gone into what's called the ring, the center of the Pentagon,
exactly.
which is
exactly.
This is a five-sided building.
Right. As you know, the rings are A, B, C, D, E. It had just caught the E ring on the outside, and that's why I felt it didn't look as damaged as it could be. It looked like on the helipad, which is on that side.
Right. Did you see any people being removed, any injured being removed, that type of thing?
No, sir. I'm up at about a quarter of a mile, maybe a little bit closer, and at that point I saw nothing like that.
Tim Timmerman, thank you very much. An eyewitness, Judy, to the crash. We still have no idea about the number of casualties. We know that there is a gaping hole on the west side of the Pentagon. As you can see, the smoke continues to billow. Judy?
All right, Bob Franken, and of course our audience, no surprise, hospitals in the Washington area dealing with casualties from the plane crash at the Pentagon. We were told a few hours ago there's a blood shortage in the Washington area. Hospitals wanting people to know if you are in a position to donate blood, it would very much be needed and appreciated. And I just want to quickly say here before we go to the site of the Pennsylvania crash that the D.C. National Guard was having difficulty getting through to people that it needs to mobilize. And this specifically, this is information specific to the Washington, D.C. area. The D.C. Guard wants to alert the 372nd Military Police Battalion and its subordinate companies to report as soon as possible to the D.C. Armory. Now, we got this information just about half an hour ago, and there have been so many other stories and pieces of information coming in. We haven't been able to get this out, but we do want to get it out now. Perhaps it will do some good. Joining us now, I mentioned to you a moment ago that we have a correspondent on the scene of the airplane crash into the ground, we believe. I'm going to go to David Mattingly, CNN correspondent there in Pennsylvania. This is near Shanksville, Somerset County in western Pennsylvania, about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh. David Mattingly, are you with us now?
Yes, Judy, I'm here, and we are outside of the town of Shanksville. And to give you some idea of what kind of countryside this is, to my left is a huge field of corn. To my right is a rolling green pastoral hill here at the edge of the Allegheny Mountains. One of the last places you would probably expect to be touched by the violence of an act of terrible terrorism like we have seen today. But people here in the area have reported that they saw the commercial airliner going overhead at about 2,000 to 3,000 feet with no landing gear down. They heard then a loud roar of an engine, at which point the jet climbed and then banked sharply to the left before going down straight on a 45-degree angle. Now, it hit the ground at that 45-degree angle. People here at the scene say there are no large pieces of debris even left from the plane. No hope of, at this point, it seems to be no hope of survivors. There's just about every piece of emergency personnel here from miles around. The mood is considerably calmer, as you might imagine, than what you might see in Washington or New York, but there is a great deal of concern. Schools are being closed, businesses are being closed up into Pittsburgh and other parts of Pennsylvania. Prayer vigils are being reported, scheduled all across this part of Pennsylvania as far as away as Altoona has been reported. Also, at this point, there has been an emergency staging area set up. We are a good ways away from the crash scene, and we will see what transpires here. Judy?
David Mattingly on the scene, as we're saying there, near Shanksville, a small town in Somerset County, about 80 miles south of Pittsburgh. This the site of one of the two United Airlines aircraft. This a Boeing 757 left Newark, New Jersey this morning on its way to San Francisco. This is the plane that we know crashed. And you just, with David Mattingly's report, looking at the site of where this plane came down. We don't know where, we presume terrorists behind this, what their destination was, what their target was. We can only presume, we can only guess that they were short of the target, that they were headed someplace farther, someplace else from where they landed. With me now here in the studio, Connecticut Democratic Senator Christopher Dodd. Senator Dodd, a longtime member of not only the Senate, but of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Dodd, first of all, what can you say to the American people listening who want to know about the security of the leaders of our country, the president, and everyone else?
Well, I think they've taken the proper steps in here, and you haven't heard as much from some of the leaders as you might like at this point, but I think those responsible for their security are doing exactly what they should be doing. I'm told that they're in very good shape, that they are being isolated because we don't know the magnitude of this effort. It's beyond our imagination already what has occurred, and if someone or organization clearly responsible for this sophisticated an effort, the potential for them doing more damage is obviously obvious. And so making sure that our leaders are secure is the right step. And for those who may be wondering abroad who are watching this program, Judy, I'm a Democrat, as you know. We stand completely and totally behind our president. We may have our differences from here, from time to time. But on a day like this, which rivals, if not exceeds, the attack on Pearl Harbor, almost 60 years ago, 3 months from now, we stand totally united behind our president and our government. They are taking the proper steps. We're pulling together as a people, and we will overcome this. Initially, obviously, our prayers and thoughts goes for those who've lost their lives, who've been injured in this incredible attack. And then
Senator,
we will... yes, I'm sorry.
Senator, I'm just going to interrupt you now. We're told President Bush just about to be wheels up from Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. And now let's go back to Aaron Brown in New York.
Judy, thank you. Senator, thank you both. I believe we have former Secretary Henry Kissinger on the phone. The Secretary is in Germany today, and he joins us on the phone from there. Mr. Kissinger, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Just quickly, sir, your reactions to what is unfolding in the United States today.
Well, it's obviously a shocking event. It was... I was giving a speech when somebody came in and interrupted the question period to make that announcement, and nobody in the room believed it. They all thought it had to be a mistake. Well, it's obviously it's an integrated attack and must be dealt with in an integrated way.
Well, when you say an integrated attack and dealt with in an integrated way, tell me what that means, sir.
Well, it is obviously any organization that can plan such a coordinated attack within a very brief period of time must have substantial resources and must have a very capable organization and must have a haven where it is planning these things. You can't do that in a back room.
And when you talk about an integrated response...
Well, the integrated response is obviously... First of all, I want to say,
okay,
like every American right now, I'm behind the president. And this, the response right now has been exactly what is needed. And there's, the first necessity has to be to go through the tragedy, to help the families, and to clean up the immediate situation. Then the next step will have to be a program to attempt to eradicate the source of this and to bring pressure and serious pressure on governments that harbor this kind of organization, and especially governments where we suspect that these organizations are located.
Sir, for a long time, there's been a kind of cat and mouse game, and I don't make light of this in any sense when I say game, between the governments that harbor terrorists and our government, other Western governments. It's all changed today, hasn't it? I mean, the stakes have changed enormously. The response likely will change enormously. It's all different, isn't it?
That's correct. When these terrorists dare to attack the territory of the United States, it then becomes a question of the functioning of our society. And we have to protect ourselves, and I'm sure we will. And I think it must now, it's not an isolated attack. It's not just an attack on an embassy, which is bad enough. And it can't be dealt with one retaliatory blow.
It cannot be dealt with one retaliatory blow?
No. There has to be a systemic attack. I don't know what that means.
I understand.
And I'm not sitting here with a great plan. I'm saying this is what I would think our government will want to work towards.
And would you expect that we, the United States government, will find enormous international support for whatever actions the United States government chooses to take, or will there be those important governments that resist here?
Well, first thing is we have to protect ourselves. We would, of course, like to get as much support as we can. And we will be able to judge our friends by the degree of support that we get. But There'll be some governments who say we have to understand the conditions that produce this. There will come a time to deal with its circumstances, but the immediate thing is these organizations have to be put on the run. If they have to spend all their time trying to survive, they have less time for terrorism.
And, Mr. Secretary, we heard, and I'm not sure you were able to, but a few moments ago, Chris Dodd, Senator Dodd of Connecticut, compared this to the attack on Pearl Harbor. Can you give me any historical context for what has taken place today, or are we a bit too close to it all to understand it yet?
Well, the attack on Pearl Harbor was, I guess, the first attack, certainly the first attack from across the seas on the territory of the United States, but it was not yet the mainland. And I agree with Senator Dodd. This is comparable to an attack on Pearl Harbor, and it must have the same response, and the people who did it must have the same end as the people who attacked Pearl Harbor. But it isn't just the people who did it, it's the people who make it possible.
These are the governments that harbor those who carry out these attacks.
That harbor or encourage them with their propaganda.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who joins us from Germany, where he was attending a conference. When he heard the news, he said it was silent, unbelievable. People simply could not believe what they were hearing. I think that's a term, a phrase you will hear a lot over the days and weeks to come. What has happened here in New York and in Washington and in other parts of the country, unbelievable. A national tragedy. Judy?
Aaron, it's true. No one is able to grasp the enormity of what we're looking at and what we're dealing with here. Let's go now to the Pentagon, where Rear Admiral Quigley is briefing reporters. I believe we have that picture right now.
Your broadcast to phone their families and loved ones immediately to let them know they're okay. And if they are among the injured or the casualties from this, then we will work our way through to identifying them and getting their names out to their loved ones. We will find a way.
Where are the injured going? Where are the injured being taken to?
A variety of area hospitals.
How big was the penetration of the plane itself, Admiral? How many rings at the building?
I don't know.
How wide would you say that gash is? 100 feet, the one we're looking at?
I haven't been over there to see it up close. I don't know. I think that's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. We'll try to be back out and give you some more information as we can.
Marine Corps only, if you wanted to do that.
That's Rear Admiral.
Admiral, how many people work?
We've been talking. You've been listening to Rear Admiral Quigley, one of the folks who works with reporters in the Public Information Office there at the Pentagon. We basically were just listening to the first few minutes of that briefing, getting the word out to people who have friends, family members who work at the Pentagon, telling them if you have people who may be among the injured, we're going to try to find a way to get you that information to get the word out about which hospital they might be in. Of course, we are dealing with tragedies in untold numbers of families across the eastern, primarily the east coast of the United States, but no doubt these people who work at the Pentagon are from everywhere. People who were on these airplanes are from commercial jets from everywhere in the United States. Aaron, back to you.
It is the enormity that's a little bit hard to get our arms around right now. Still, some considerable number of hours since the first attack on the World Trade Center here in New York. And I want to show some pictures of the scene from the ground. But first, let me just, a piece of information. United Airlines has now canceled all flights, grounded all flights until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. This is the scene that started to play out. This would be a little after 9 when the first of the trade centers collapsed after they were hit. People gathering, watching. You can see this, the denseness of the smoke. People leaving in a very orderly, calm way. Have been the reports all morning and afternoon long. One witness who was in the building talked about coming down the stairwell and that people were very quiet. There was no screaming, no crying. People shielding themselves against the smoke. We know that a number of New York City police and fire department personnel have been injured, perhaps some fatally when the buildings collapsed. We know that hospitals here in New York are in desperate need of blood. We know that the National Guard will be coming into the city to help in support of the 40,000 members of the New York City Police Department. We know that subway service in Manhattan has been shut down. People evacuating streams of people through the streets. There are 50,000 people who go to work just in the Trade Center buildings, the two towers. How many of them were there at the time, we do not know. Thousands, tens of thousands more pass through, getting on and off trains, going to the retail shops and restaurants. Every one of those lives changed today, as perhaps in some way all of our lives have been changed today. It all began at 8:45 this morning. And behind us now, the smoke continues to pour out of the area where the Trade Center towers were. They are no more. They collapsed in the hour after the attack, but the smoke continues to pour through that area behind us, about 30 blocks away, in one of those scenes that none of us will ever forget. CNN correspondent Richard Roth has been on the streets here in Lower Manhattan. Richard?
Yes, Aaron, not chaos here. It's almost eerily silent of the march of thousands of New Yorkers evacuating southern Manhattan, looking to go to New Jersey to get off this island. Dazed, stunned, people concerned about loved ones, cell phones not working. New Yorkers are used to coping with a lot of things here. There have been some bombings and hurricanes and calamities, but really nothing like this before. And of course, behind me, the clouds of where the World Trade Center stood, two towers built in 1970. A short time ago, a Port Authority police official, the Port Authority is the state unit that runs, in effect, the World Trade Center, those buildings that formerly existed, and one of the police officials there, William Hall, said there is no search going on right now. He said until the fires go out, until it is safe for his people and other rescue workers to go in, they are not moving in there. He said on an average day, the two World Trade Center towers get 10,000 people each with 5,000 visitors. A New York City police official told us a short time ago that another triage center is going to be set up here on the west side of Manhattan, 33rd Street area in the Jacob Javits Convention Center. This to handle additional overflow from New York City hospitals, which New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani says have been doing their best in coping with it, but there have been calls for blood. People here walking by me, someone will point to someone and say, this person was in the World Trade Center, just got out. You can hear behind me there is the roar of military aircraft, the only aircraft you see in the sky. And usually, as New Yorkers will tell you, you can look up at any time and see a plane. They are up in the sky, concerned look from people who gaze upward, shield their eyes to see just what's going on, and an occasional police helicopter. But here in New York City, there is no search going on. William Hall of the Port Authority said we're going to have to wait until we get things all accounted for before we can go in there. Aaron.
Richard, thank you. Richard Roth in Lower Manhattan. Again, just a quick recap for those of you who may just be getting home and hearing these events for the first time. 8:48 this morning, One of those moments that everyone will remember. The first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, Boston to Los Angeles, hijacked, crashed into the First Trade Center tower. At 9:04, the second plane, a United Airlines flight, United 175, Boston to Los Angeles, hit the second tower. About a half hour later, 9:38 Eastern Time, American Airlines Flight 77, Washington Dulles Airport to Los Angeles, crashed into the Pentagon, hitting just short of the Pentagon itself, and perhaps that was most fortunate. And at 10:20 a.m. Eastern Time, United Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco, crashed about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh. Those are the times and the events. They don't begin to describe what has happened. What has happened is not simply a series of moments, but something much larger. Phil Zepeda is with the American Red Cross, and he is on the phone with us. Mr. Zepeda, this is Aaron Brown. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can, Aaron.
Tell me what sort of strain is on the Red Cross's resources right now?
Well, the American Red Cross responded immediately to all areas of this disaster. Right now, our focus is really on disaster relief, providing blood assistance, and any disaster mental health assistance that we can provide around the country to both the survivors and the families who've been involved in this tragedy.
Phil, tell me what that means exactly. I understand the need for blood. Are you setting up shelters for people?
Sure. We have shelters both in New York City and to meet with people and to register people as they come in and are trying to get away from the situation. We are set up in New York at Penn Station, at Grand Central Station, and in Washington, D.C. at Fort Belvedere. It is still chaos right now. We are in the process of ramping up our operations. While we did respond immediately, there's so much work to be done, and we're in the process of doing that right now. We have about 50,000 units of blood that are available for the affected areas, and the American Red Cross is looking at mobilizing that right now and putting that into place.
And Phil, as you were speaking, we were able to put up on the screen numbers that people can call if they can help. If you're sitting in Omaha, Nebraska today, is it helpful in this situation to be going to the blood bank and giving blood, or is it too far away to be meaningful?
The message that the American Red Cross is putting out right now is to donate blood. Call 1-800-GIVE-LIFE, GIVELI.
CNN's Miles O'Brien has been tracking the flight paths of these 4 planes that were involved. Miles, are you able to hear me in Atlanta?
Yes, I am, Aaron.
And tell me what you've been able to figure out to this point.
Well, as you probably know, Aaron, there are various commercial websites that allow you to track commercial aircraft. Now, if you go to many of them right now, you're not going to get very far because they're being overwhelmed by interest in people. But even if you could get some of the data, we have just learned from the Federal Aviation Administration that every domestic airliner that was in the air is now on the ground. This is unprecedented in aviation history in this country. There's not a plane flying right now. At any given moment, typically there are 4,000 aircraft. Now, let's take a look at what happened on American Airlines Flight 11. Began in Boston, and it took off on time, 81 people aboard, 9 crew members, 9 flight attendants and 2 pilots. And let's sort of track what happened with this flight. As it went across Massachusetts and went down into the Albany area, actually up in the Adirondacks, it took a sharp dogleg. What's interesting about this flight is everything seemed to be normal. Flight at altitude was about 29,000 feet, gaining speed at about 450 knots. It took that sharp dogleg down across the Adirondacks straight for New York. Now, what will be interesting about this as this story unfolds will be, number one, listening to any air traffic control conversations to get a sense of what, if anything, air traffic controllers were saying to this aircraft. Undoubtedly, this was spotted on the radar screens, of course. They had quite a bit of time to watch this plane as it went down toward New York. That's probably at least a 30-minute run there. And during the course of that time, those air traffic controllers in those radar installations, New York Center, as it is called, would have been trying to contact American Airlines Flight 11 to indicate its intentions. It must have been a horrifying scene for them. They were probably trying to clear air traffic out of the area. Clearly, once those tapes become available, we'll have a little bit more knowledge. And if it is possible to locate any of the so-called black boxes, the flight data recorders, cockpit voice recorder out of this particular aircraft, they'll obviously know more about what was going on what must have been a very dramatic flight indeed. Now, this is the first flight. This is the flight that first impacted the first tower of the World Trade Center, and this is the first of 4 that we know about, of course, 4 air hijackings, which led to crashes and obviously a tremendous amount of damage. I'm getting this information from a company called FlightExplorer.com. They are compiling their archival radar information from this morning, and as it becomes available, we'll be able to show you the flight paths of the other 3 aircraft that are suspected in all of this, and we'll bring those to you as soon as we get that. Aaron?
Just a quick practical question. These tapes of the cockpit tower communications, do they exist on the ground?
Yes.
Are they recorded in control towers? And then there's a different set of tapes that exist on the plane.
Exactly. It's important to bring out there are 2 types of tapes in these incidents. The tapes on the ground are the ones that record the radio transmissions between the ground and the aircraft, and clearly the flight controllers would have been calling this aircraft numerous times, and this would have been the case for the 3 others if they deviated from their courses, trying to get some indication as to what was wrong, why the pilot was changing course so dramatically. Now, what will be interesting to hear is if there is some sort of response from these aircraft. This will give us some clue as to who might have been in control of the plane at the time, or if there might have been some sort of struggle aboard, or if there was just a lack of a struggle. There's a lot of mystery here, obviously. Now, ultimately, as they go through the wreckage in these cases, it's possible that investigators, and there's a good chance because they have emergency locating devices on them, they'll find these so-called black boxes, and on those black boxes there might be much more information which might give authorities some clues as to who might be responsible.
Several different kinds of information. There's technical information in these black boxes, what the airplane was doing in a sense, but there's also communications between the cabin crew that exist on those tapes, what pilot was saying to co-pilot. We might be able to hear, if these tapes are ever located, what the people who took control of these planes, and that's clearly what happened. Seems clear that that's what happened. What they were saying, whether these tapes will ever be found, obviously we don't yet know. But that is part of what will happen in the next days. On this day, what is happening in both Washington and New York and in a field outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is a massive rescue operation, a massive triage operation. Thousands of people, presumably, have been hurt. Many people, we suspect, have died. Though many hours now since that first plane hit the Trade Center at 8:48 Eastern Time, we have yet to hear from any official in the city, any estimate here in New York of the number of people who have been hurt. We just know that hospitals are inundated, that hospitals are running very low on blood, and they need help here. We know that the National Guard will be coming in here to New York to help in support of the New York Police Department. We would add here that a number of members, and we don't know how many, but after the police and fire responded to these 2 planes hitting the Trade Center, many police officers, many firefighters, many EMS personnel were in the area when the buildings collapsed. How many of them were hurt, we do not know. But we've been told now by 2 officials or former officials with the city that any number of people, police and fire officials, have been hurt as well. Judy in Washington, Judy Woodruff. Judy.
And Aaron, just picking up on your conversation with Miles O'Brien a moment ago, and perhaps you all referred to this, and I apologize if I'm repeating, the Associated Press reporting on a passenger that was on United Flight 93. Now, this is the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. About 20 minutes before that plane crashed, a passenger with a cell phone locked in a bathroom actually called an emergency dispatcher and shouted into the cell phone, "We are being hijacked, we're being hijacked." They apparently stayed on the phone with this passenger up until the moment when the passenger heard some sort of a loud noise, and then they lost contact. That's just one more piece of the stories, the many stories that we are pulling together as we watch these developments in Pennsylvania, here in Washington, and of course in New York City. And you just heard Aaron talking about incomplete information about casualties, what hospitals are dealing with. Now, these numbers I'm going to read you right now are only incomplete. We are just beginning to get this kind of information. We're told at Washington area hospitals right now, 53 injured, at least 3 more casualties on the way, although we have to believe that with the commercial jetliner that crashed at the Pentagon, or just in front of the Pentagon, and that was the Boeing 757, and these are the pictures of the Pentagon just outside the Pentagon. 58 passengers on board, 4 crew members and 2 pilots. It is impossible to believe that they did not all perish, and we don't know about others who work at the Pentagon who were in the part of that building that was most affected when that commercial plane went down. We've been talking with a number of people involved in rescue, and right now we want to go to the President's statement. This took place just about an hour and 15 minutes ago. The President was on his way back to Washington from Florida. His plane touched down at an Air Force base in Louisiana, Barksdale Air Force Base near Shreveport. We can now report that information because he's since left Barksdale. But here is what President George W. Bush had to say in this statement.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
President Bush made that statement just about an hour and 20 minutes ago at Barksdale Air Force Base near Shreveport, Louisiana. That was an unplanned stop that the president made at that place in order to talk with reporters, meet with others. Since then, Air Force One has taken off, President Bush being flown to an undisclosed location. We're told also that Secretary of State Colin Powell, who had been on his way back to the United States from Peru, being taken to an undisclosed location. Outside the Pentagon, CNN's military affairs correspondent Jamie McIntyre. And Jamie, you got very close to where that plane went down.
That's right, Judy. A while ago, I walked right up to next to the building was firefighters were still trying to put out the blaze. The fire, by the way, is still burning in some parts of the Pentagon. And I took a look at the huge gaping hole that's in this side of the Pentagon, in an area of the Pentagon that has been recently renovated, part of a multi-billion-dollar renovation program here at the Pentagon. I could see parts of the airplane that crashed into the building, very small pieces of the plane on the heliport outside the building. The biggest piece I saw was about 3 feet long. It was silver and had been painted green and red, but I could not see any identifying markings on the plane. I also saw a large piece of shattered glass. It appeared to be a cockpit windshield or other window from the plane. When this plane hit the Pentagon this morning, according to the Pentagon spokesman Craig Quigley, the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld incredibly is described as having run out of his office and down to actually help some of the
victims onto stretchers until he was ushered into the National Military Command Center, the secure nerve center or war room deep inside the Pentagon, where he remains at this time. Pentagon officials say he'll stay there for the time being. That is a place where all of U.S. intelligence comes in, and he has complete command with his commanders around the world. At the same time, the Pentagon has dispatched several warships out of port in Norfolk, including the the carriers USS George Washington and USS Kennedy. The ostensible reason for that, the movement of those ships and their escort ships, is to move them from more vulnerable positions. But the Navy says they'll also head some of the aircraft carriers up toward New York with the idea that they may be able to render some kind of assistance there, given the magnitude of the tragedy there. Back here, the fight goes on to put out the fire inside the Pentagon. The heat from that blaze was described as absolutely intense, and the number of casualties here has still not been released. Dozens of people were taken away in ambulances, and the Pentagon is still not releasing any figures on deaths. But clearly, people who had offices in that what is now a huge gaping hole in the side of the Pentagon, clearly there were some people killed in this tragedy. Judy?
Jamie, Aaron was talking earlier, one of our correspondents was talking earlier, I think it was Bob Franken, with an eyewitness who said it appeared that Boeing 757, the American Airlines jet, landed short of the Pentagon. Can you give us any better idea of how much of the plane actually impacted the building?
You know, it might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual side of the building that's crashed in, and as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around, which would indicate that the entire plane crashed into the side of the Pentagon and then caused the side to collapse. Now, even though if you look at the pictures of the Pentagon, you see that the floors have all collapsed, that didn't happen immediately. It wasn't until almost about 45 minutes later that the structure was weakened enough that all of the floors collapsed.
And Jamie, this happened, we're now able to reconstruct about 9:38 this morning. At that time, Jamie, what are we talking about? Dozens, hundreds of people at work in the building?
There are 24,000 people who work in this building, and most of them are at work at that hour of the morning. They were all evacuated from the building. In my office, which is sort of halfway between where this took place and the other side of the building, which is where the Defense Secretary's office is, eventually even the corridor I was in began to fill up with smoke just as I began to leave the building. But this was the prime time for an attack. However, it's not the prime location. Every time we've thought about what might happen if the Pentagon were subject of attack, we always assumed that the attack would come on the other side, the river entrance where the brass are. But this attack came on the side facing Arlington Cemetery.
All right, Jamie McIntyre, military affairs correspondent, and just to underline what we're seeing at the Pentagon, nothing on the scale of the devastation in New York City, where you have two entire towers of the World Trade Center collapsing, but still this has to be supposedly the most secure of secure buildings in Washington, D.C., and an commercial airplane flew right into it. So we are just, again, trying to get our minds around the magnitude of what these people have gotten away with. Nick Robertson, correspondent, joining us now on the telephone. Nick, you are in Kabul. Is that correct? Nick, are you hearing me right now?
That's correct, Judy. And we've just had... Yes, Judy, I hear you fine. We are hearing from Mullah Omar in the spiritual capital of Afghanistan, about 300 miles south of here. Mullah Omar is the spiritual leader of the Taliban here, and he's recently issued a short statement. In that statement, he criticizes what he called an act of terrorism, and he was very explicit. He said that Osama bin Laden was not responsible for it, and he said that all he wanted for his country was peace, and peace for other countries in the world. And he went on to say that he believed Osama bin Laden could not have been responsible for such a complex act of terrorism. And he also said that if Afghanistan is a poor country, and therefore he believed there was no way that Afghanistan could be involved in such a complicated act of terrorism. Judy?
Nick, help us understand, who is Moore Omar, the gentleman you're quoting?
He is the spiritual leader of the Taliban. The Taliban run 95% of Afghanistan. They control the capital, Kabul. They control most of Afghanistan, the south of Afghanistan. Mullah Omar lives in the south of Afghanistan in the spiritual capital, which is the ethnic area that he comes from, the Pashtun area around Kandahar. There are ministries of the Taliban here in Kabul. The foreign minister is here in Kabul at the moment. He is often based in Kandahar as well. And there are other ministry officials also based in Kabul. But the direction for Afghanistan, the direction for the ministries, the key decisions are all made in Kandahar, and Mullah Omar is the focal point of all those decisions. It is to him that a key group of ministers would go with a problem, with an issue, and it is he that would decide on any given issue. He is the final arbiter here of law and of justice. Judy?
Nick, where is it believed that Osama bin Laden is in Afghanistan?
That is a very difficult question to answer. Osama bin Laden, his location is kept extremely secret. As foreign media traveling around Afghanistan, one is often watched and an eye is kept on us by various ministries to ensure that we don't go searching around the country. Our movements around the country are generally restricted to main cities that are agreed in advance by the authorities. So it's very difficult to gauge where Osama bin Laden is. It is understood that he travels around at night. It's understood that he has operated out of various training camps that were built to help train Mujahideen fighters to fight the Soviet occupation in the 1980s. Those are based, some of them towards the border with Pakistan in an area called Host. Those were the training camps that were hit in the 1998 cruise missile attack on Afghanistan. It's also rumored that Osama bin Laden spends some time close to Kandahar, close to the spiritual leader of the Taliban, Mullah Omar. But to exactly put a fix on his location is a very, very difficult thing to do. He works by extreme secrecy. The very few journalists that have been able to meet with him over the last few years are always held at a location and taken blindfold to another location where they can interview him. So people generally, when they meet him, they don't know exactly where they are. They wait there, he arrives, he departs, then they're free to leave. He lives by extreme secrecy here.
If necessary. All right, CNN's Nick Robertson joining us, as you could see, from Kabul, Afghanistan, the country run by the religious group, the Taliban, the group that has been suspected, believed for some time of harboring Osama bin Laden. Thank you very much, Nick. And again, we apologize for the delay in the audio there. It is because Nick is on this video phone, which is a new device that we're using, and there is always a delay. Tends to be a delay in audio. I want to bring in now our national security correspondent, David Ensor. You're looking at pictures as I do this from New York City in the moments following the worst of today's attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City, Lower Manhattan, where you can see people running in sheer terror away from either one of the two airplane crashes into the top of the World Trade Center, both towers of which collapsed later on, to the utter horror of people watching both live and on television across the United States and around the world, for that matter. New York City, the subject of the worst terrorism ever to strike the United States. So while we certainly mourn the loss here in Washington at the Pentagon, the airplane that crashed into the Pentagon, the other airplane that crashed near Pittsburgh, both of them commercial airliners with civilians on board, the loss of life in New York City is utterly unbelievable. And just picking up, as we look at these pictures, picking up on what Nick Robertson was saying from Afghanistan, even as the leaders of the Taliban deny any role in this, an Arab journalist based in London is quoted today to the Associated Press as saying that followers of Osama bin Laden warned 3 weeks ago they were going to carry out this sort of an attack. New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani joining us once again. Mayor Giuliani.
The tragedy that we're all undergoing right now is something that we've had nightmares about, but probably thought wouldn't happen. My heart goes out to all of the innocent victims of this horrible and vicious acts of terrorism. And our focus now has to be on saving as many lives as possible. We have hundreds of police officers and firefighters who are engaging in rescue efforts in Lower Manhattan. I want to thank Governor Pataki for the incredible cooperation and coordination, and including deploying the National Guard that will be available to relieve our police officers and firefighters and emergency workers in the next couple of hours. The governor and I just spoke to the President of the United States. The coordination with the federal government from the time of the first attack has been excellent, including closing off the airspace around Manhattan and doing everything that can possibly be done in the face of this barbaric act to make the city secure. And we will strive now very hard to save as many people as possible and to send a message that the city of New York and the United States of America is much stronger than any group of barbaric terrorists, that our democracy, that our rule of law, that our strength and our willingness to defend ourselves will ultimately prevail. And I'd ask the people of New York City to do everything that they can to cooperate, not to be frightened, to go about their lives as normal. Everything is safe right now in the city, and the people who are doing the relief effort need all the help they can get. And then, Governor, thank you very much for your assistance and your help and your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership through this crisis. This is a vicious attack upon New York. It's an attack upon America. It's an attack upon the whole concept of freedom and our way of life. And we cannot let these attacks succeed. The first step has to be to make sure we do everything in our power to protect the people and to save the lives of those whose lives are still at risk and to help those who have been injured. And I want to commend the mayor, and I want to thank my colleagues from Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and the federal government have all offered and made ready support to help us deal with this ongoing crisis. The people of New York are not only the freest and most diverse people in the world, we're also, I believe, the most capable of rising to meet the challenges of this type of attack. And right now we want New Yorkers to remain calm, to go about their business, to appreciate the fact that everything to provide for their safety is being done, to appreciate that everything that can be done to provide for the health and the needs of the people who are still at risk is being done, and that we will continue to work to make sure that we get through this as strongly and quickly as possible. I want to thank the federal administration. Secretary Thompson has been on the phone with me a number of times, as well as the President, for what they are offering and prepared to do. And we're just confident that, while this is a horrible attack and one that is despicable and really unthinkable in its magnitude, we will get through this, and we will continue to have a great and free country, state, and society.
Do we know the number of casualties at this point, sir?
I don't think we really want to speculate about that. The number of casualties will be more than any of us can bear ultimately. And I don't think we want to speculate on the number of casualties. The effort now has to be to save as many people as possible.
There are large numbers.
And I don't think we will know the answer to that until sometime tomorrow or the next day.
Were there large numbers of firefighters?
There are a large number of firefighters and police officers who are in harm's way. And we don't know how many we've lost. But there's no doubt we've lost some firefighters and police officers.
Do you know anything about the cause of the explosions that brought the two buildings down yet? Was it caused by the planes or by something else?
We believe that it was caused by the after effects of the planes hitting the buildings. We don't know of an additional explosion after that.
report that 8 planes have been hijacked, 4 have only been accounted for. What about the remaining 4? And is there any possibility that there could be bombs on the ground planted by...
We have no specific information to that effect. Obviously, the city is now closed. The airspace around the city is closed. And we are on heightened alert. But we have no specific information suggesting any further attack.
Can you tell us where the planes came from?
I think to give the people of New York confidence, to show that the federal government is standing with us, and to just to make certain that nothing further happens. This has been a very, very difficult and traumatic day for the people of the United States and the people of the city. And I think that it's an act that shows that the federal government is going to do everything they can to support us and help us.
Can you give us an idea of the extent of the rescue effort that's going on right now in Lower Manhattan? The scope of this operation?
There are over 1,000 rescue workers, probably about 2,000 that are deployed, trying to get into the buildings, trying to find people, trying to search for people. The governor and I spoke a couple of hours ago. The governor has deployed the National Guard to relieve them because our people are going to need reinforcements pretty soon. But right now they don't want to leave because they're searching for innocent citizens, and they're searching for some of their brothers and sisters.
Are you finding survivors?
Yes, we have some numbers that we can give you. We have 1,500 people at Liberty State Park who were evacuated, described as walking wounded. They were evacuated by ferry and other means. There are about 600, as of about 15 minutes ago, in local hospitals that we account for. 600 people that are being treated in local hospitals. And there are 150 in particular that were critical, that were moved by EMS. New York City has 170 hospitals. So we have a lot of hospitals, and we're utilizing all of them. Probably the one that was the hardest hit was St. Vincent's Hospital. And I would like to just single them out and commend them, because as I was rushing down there, after the first plane hit, before the second, they were already deploying people on the street. I could see the doctors and nurses outside getting ready to receive people. And that was before the second plane actually hit the World Trade Center.
What was your experience down there?
Also blood donations. We have several sites for blood donations. 153 East 53rd Street, 66 in Amsterdam, which is the Red Cross, and 310 East 67th Street. If people want to do something and they can donate blood, that's going to help not just today, but tomorrow and the next day. This relief effort is going to take some time.
Mr. Mayor, you were one of the first people down there. Can you describe the scene in your own words, what you saw down there?
I don't know that I'm really able to describe it. It was the most horrific scene I've ever seen in my whole life. We saw the World Trade Center in flames, a big gaping hole all the way on the top of it. We could see people jumping from the top of the building. And then we went into Barclay Street, 75 Barclay Street, I think it was, and we were there when the building collapsed. And it collapsed in part on 75 Barclay Street. So we were trapped in the building for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, trying to get out different exits. We finally went through a basement and came out 100 Park Place.
Did you ever fear for your own safety, sir?
Sure, yeah.
What went through your mind?
I don't think anything went through my mind other than making sure that we all remained calm and found an exit and just tried to figure out the most intelligent thing to do. Probably the same thing that went through the minds of 10,000 other New Yorkers who I could see on the streets, and I really have to commend them. If you really want to know what New Yorkers are all about, you just watch the way in which they handled themselves. They didn't panic. They moved deliberately. They moved swiftly. But they didn't hurt each other. They helped each other. And these are just the most wonderful people in the world.
Do we know anything about the composition of that dust that blankets Lower Manhattan? Is there any asbestos or any hazardous material in that dust?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to this.
Mr. Mayor, there were reports of gas explosion related to this. Are you aware of that? There was a gas leak or possible explosion?
We don't believe it. We don't believe that's the case.
Mr. Mayor, can you tell us anything about where the planes come from, where the aircraft came from?
Bill Diamond reminds me that we've turned off the gas in the city buildings, just to be certain.
Can you tell us
as a precaution
where these aircraft came from? There was a report that may have been hijacked in
I think we should leave. I think we should leave that up to the federal government to. Yes, we do have some information, but I think we should leave that up to the federal government to release that information. Our focus is on the relief efforts. And
What about security? Do you think there should be any retaliation on the part of the United States for what happened here in this country, both in New York, Washington, other places?
First step right now, Marcia, is to make sure we do everything to help those people who need our support, and whether they're injured or still trapped in buildings. The second thing is to make sure at the same time we're providing the maximum security against possible additional incidents. But clearly, this is an attack upon America. It's an attack upon our freedom and our way of life, and we must retaliate and go after those who perpetuated this heinous crime against the people of America.
Mayor, this is just compared to Pearl Harbor. Do you consider this to be an act of war? This has been compared.
I'll do both.
This has been compared to Pearl Harbor. Do you consider this to be an act of war?
This is a vicious, unprovoked, horrible attack on innocent men, women, and children. It's one of the most heinous acts, certainly in world history. And as the governor said, and I said to the president, we fully and completely support him in any action that he has to take in order to make an example out of the people who are responsible for this.
Is it an act of war in your mind?
I don't know that I want to use those words. I think the president is the one that has to respond, and I think what he has to know is that all of us in New York support him, and support him completely in the efforts that he's going to have to make over the next couple of days, week, and to make a point that people can't do this. You can't attack innocent men, women, and children. And ultimately, I'm totally confident that American democracy and the American rule of law will prevail. And the people of New York are going to help to demonstrate that over the next couple of days.
Anybody take responsibility for this? Any group take responsibility at this time? And what is the city doing to safeguard the citizens now that something like this happens?
Well, first of all, I don't know of anyone that's taken responsibility for it at this time. And secondly, the New York City Police Department is fully deployed, not just in the rescue effort, but all throughout the city of New York, offering as much protection and as much security as we're capable of for the citizens of the city. And at this point, I believe that the people in New York City can demonstrate our resolve and our support for all of the people that were viciously attacked today by going about their lives and showing everyone that vicious, cowardly terrorists can't stop us from being a free country and a place that functions. And we'll do everything we can to make that point.
Jennifer Steinhauer, please. Just a housekeeping. Can you please tell us what's going to happen to the New York primary?
This morning, I issued an order suspending the primary across the state. There will be no primary today, and we'll reschedule it once we get through this.
Jennifer, please.
Can you please walk us through the municipal services right now? What's going on with the subway and the schools?
The subway, the schools, the chancellor, I commend the chancellor. He was on the phone a number of times with us. He coordinated very, very carefully what would happen. He thought it out, and he came up with a very good plan, which was essentially to keep the schools open, to keep the children in school, so we didn't have a large number of children in the different boroughs that would be released from school. They're being released. I shouldn't say as normal, but basically on the normal schedule. If parents aren't there to pick up the young children, then the children will be taken to a center, and the parents will be notified to come and pick them up. The children who have Metro cards, who normally travel on the subway, will be able to do that. The subways are functioning in 4 of the 5 boroughs. And can we get an update, Joe, on how the subway's doing in Manhattan?
All the lettered lines are working.
And in Manhattan?
In Manhattan lines, all the lettered lines.
All the lettered lines are working, including in Manhattan. And throughout the rest of the city, public transportation is normal. So the children should be able to return from school in the normal fashion. And if any children don't have parents to pick them up, then we'll hold them, let the parents know, and then the parents can come and pick them up.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned you were on Barclay Street. What's the radius of damage that's been affected? How many other side streets around the world?
I don't think we know yet. The whole area of Lower Manhattan has been very much affected by it.
How many police and fire are involved? Like how many all NYPD off-duty officers have they come in? Or like
all NYPD and FDNY officers are on duty now. And we're going to need all of them, and again, thanks to the governor and the way in which the state reacted, we will have 1,600 National Guard to relieve them over a period of time, so we can get some relief for them.
If anybody's looking for someone that may have been in the World Trade Center or in and around that area, what should they do? How can they get
We're going to give you numbers so that we can try to help coordinate that. Individual businesses have already done that, but we will as soon as we can find some time, from the relief efforts, give you a number in which people can call, and then we can direct them to the right place.
The National Guard will only be showing anything like that? Any lawlessness?
There have been no reports of lawlessness, no reports of looting. As I said, we saw a lot of people that were part of the escape effort. And they seem to be conducting themselves in a very, very sensible way, a very deliberate way. They seem to be helping each other. So I don't think we have any reports like that at all.
So the only National Guard we'll see will be in Lower Manhattan, in the bomb site area. They won't be patrolling the rest of Manhattan.
No, the purpose of it is to help with the relief effort. We're going to need the help of the state, surrounding areas with heavy-duty equipment.
When will they be arriving?
The National Guard troops, some have arrived already, and we expect to have up to close to 2,000 between the National Guard and the state police by later this evening.
Mayor, bridges and tunnels will have to stay closed.
I think everything is closed for now, and then maybe in about an hour or two we can give you an update on what the plan will be for tomorrow.
We saw a lot of lightly injured people walking out of the area because obviously the emergency services were needed for the very seriously injured. People come with some people had difficulty breathing. Is there any health advice to give to people who are caught in this thing, who are not necessarily at risk of losing their life, but
I think well, obviously if you feel ill or you feel that you've been affected by it, you should go to a hospital and get checked out. But if it's just discomfort that you feel, then you can do basically what we did, was to wash our faces off and get rid of the clothes and get to an area where you can breathe in fresh air.
How many people were in the World Trade Center at the time of this attack?
I mean, it was business had already started. It was right before 9 o'clock. I don't know.
Tens of thousands?
Yes. Approximately. Someone just gave me a number of approximately 10,000, but that's a guess.
How long will the city remain on a heightened state of alert?
Until we're told not to. I mean, until the FBI and the police department and the federal government tells us that we shouldn't. Right now, the city is should be on a state of alert. Now, that instead of frightening people, that should make people feel more confident that everything is being done to keep things secure. And again, let me emphasize that the reason for the National Guard, because I heard the question before, is to help with the relief effort, not because there's any fear of any other problems in the city right now.
How is the
Mr.
Port
Mayor, can you tell us
Authority
about the other public buildings, City Hall, One Police Plaza? When will you say for you to return?
I don't know yet. I don't know yet. Hopefully soon, but I don't know the answer to that.
And we heard reports that One Police Plaza was evacuated. Was that true?
No, the command center is open.
And it was never...
We have people in the command center right now.
There have also been reports of large loss of life among the police and firemen who were sent there to rescue people. How accurate are those reports?
There is no question that we lost police officers and firefighters, and some that I know personally, and all of us here know personally, that we're very worried about. And we're not going to know the answer to that until much later. And maybe we should just close now and give you a briefing later. And I would just ask everyone, I talked to Cardinal Egan before because he's at St. Vincent's Hospital. Everybody should in their own way say a prayer and ask God for help and for assistance, and also ask God to give us the strength to overcome this, because I know we're going to need strength to overcome it. And I want the people of New York to be an example to the rest of the country and the rest of the world that terrorism can't stop us. American democracy is much stronger than a vicious, cowardly terrorist, and we're going to overcome this.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani and New York Governor George Pataki talking to reporters. The mayor urged New Yorkers to be calm and said they had been, and indeed in every picture we have seen of the area around the Trade Center, people were evacuating in a very calm, deliberate, no panic that we have been able to see from the pictures we have taken and the reporting we have done. The mayor said 1,500 walking wounded, as he described it, taken to Liberty State Park, 600 people in local hospitals, at least 150 people in critical condition. But in fact, the mayor said he would not even venture a guess at what these numbers will become as this day continues to unfold. And tomorrow, he acknowledged it'll be several days before we really know how many people have been hurt, how many people have died. We would add one other point here I don't believe we have mentioned. As you know, airports around the country have been shut down. Every airport around the country has been shut down for the first time in the country's history. The FAA says now that there will be no commercial air traffic in the United States until at least noon tomorrow. No commercial flights anywhere in the country, not just New York and Washington, anywhere until noon tomorrow. We know that many of you are just now coming home, joining us, and so we want to walk you through what has gone on both here in New York City and in Washington. We go to Atlanta and our colleague Joey Chin. Joey, good afternoon.
Aaron, extraordinary coverage there on the rooftops in New York of this extraordinary and horrific series of events that we have been watching throughout this day here on CNN. Acts of terrorism, and it's such an unprecedented scope and scale. It is really quite difficult to follow, and quite frankly, there had been an enormous amount of confusion as all of these events were unfolding through the day. So we are trying as best as we can to try to walk you through all this now, to bring you all up to date on what we know about the events that have taken place today. Beginning at 8:45 this morning, that is Eastern time, when the World Trade Center, the workday was well underway there in Lower Manhattan, an airliner crashing into one of the twin towers of the Trade Center. The people in New York, and then very quickly people all around the nation, watching just terrible horror as the thick black smoke billowed from the tower. But that, as it turned out, as it proved, was really just the beginning. 18 minutes later, just 18 minutes later, you see in the highlighted picture there on the right side another very big commercial jumbo jet moving towards the other tower of the World Trade Center, and there you see again the explosion taking place on camera for all to see, quite apparently, quite specifically designed to do that. That was at 9:03 Eastern. Cameras were trained on the two twin centers. Of course, you know that the Trade Center was the target of a terror bombing back in 1993, which killed 6 people. The attack injured so many more, and it really does pale in comparison to what we are seeing today, although, as you just heard from the mayor of the city of New York, nobody wants to make a guess yet on what the final toll will be. In the middle of all of this, suddenly Washington became a target. You see it here. This is the Pentagon, which we always view as some sort of an impenetrable fortress. Pentagon, the symbol of the nation's military might, also a command post today. Pentagon racked by the explosion that occurred at 9:45 this morning. Witnesses say that the commercial aircraft crashed into the Army side of the building. And that has been confirmed by authorities. It's about this time that the federal government ordered all the nation's airports closed and ordered all planes in the air to get on the ground. And as you just heard from Aaron Brown, commercial aircraft will not be in the nation's skies again until sometime tomorrow. Now we'll move ahead to 10 o'clock Eastern. The first of the two Trade Center towers collapses, and you see the tremendous plume of smoke and debris left. This is an image we cannot forget. That was the visual sighting, and you see really just almost an explosion, an implosion, as it just gave away all that was left, the ash falling from the top of the tower as it came down. 29 minutes later, the second Trade Center tower collapsing. We can report that we know some 50,000 people work daily in the area of the Trade Center buildings. These towers are U.S. landmarks. They receive tens of thousands of visitors each day. The mayor of New York City has said that he does believe a horrendous number of lives has been lost in the course of this tragedy, but he did not want to wager any sort of speculation on what the final toll would be. At least one witness told us that in the moments before the buildings collapsed, he saw people leaping to try to save their own lives from the Trade Center towers. Back in Washington, we get a closer look at what occurred at the Pentagon. What was left, the great flames in the gaping hole of the Pentagon, apparently left by that hijacked plane that crashed into the Department of Defense. Again, we're told this is the Army side of the building of the Pentagon building, which of course has 5 sides. Now, a commercial aircraft, we also know, has crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. That is south-southeast of Pittsburgh, about 80 miles south-southeast of Pittsburgh along I-76. The report says that just before the crash, a passenger who was on board telephoned 911 saying that the plane had been hijacked and trying to get help. Now that would explain the crash there for all 4 planes that have been confirmed as being hijacked over U.S. skies today. Again, 2 crashing into the World Trade Center towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and this last one, you see the debris of it there. in the agricultural area, the farming areas, the rolling hills of Pennsylvania. I want to now try to show you some live pictures now of Lower Manhattan at this hour. Again, you still see a thick plume of smoke there. Aaron Brown standing by again in his vantage point on a rooftop in New York City now. Aaron, what are you seeing?
Joey, thank you. We can see, as our viewers can see, the smoke continues to billow out of the Trade Center buildings 6 hours, more than 6 hours after the planes hit. 50,000 people going to work in those buildings. We're joined now on the phone by former Secretary of State James Baker and former Defense Secretary William Cohen. Mr. Baker, let me begin with you. You've been involved in some extraordinary events in the course of your government service. Can you give us any sense at all of what you expect it is like in the Situation Room right now?
Well, I'm sure that it's extraordinarily busy, and it is really a very sorrowful day for our country. We've lost many innocent civilians to what can only be characterized as a very dastardly and cowardly act. A terribly tragic day for America, but I really sense, Aaron, that we may be entering a bit of a new era, an era where we have been worried in the past about terrorism against America. We've always been able to handle it. We obviously were not in a position to handle it today. We do not know all the facts, but we can, I think, suppose and surmise a few things. And one of those is that it took a fairly, I think, sophisticated and complicated planning apparatus to plan and carry out these events.
And Secretary Cohen, not a lot of groups in the world would be capable of this degree of sophistication, would have the financing, the wherewithal to pull this off, would they?
I think that's correct. We don't know at this point exactly which group it is, but there aren't many that would have this degree of sophistication and ability to calibrate it so that you'd have nearly simultaneous attacks on three important symbols and sites in the United States.
And, sir, when we talk about not very many, are we talking about a handful, 3 or 4, a dozen? What do we mean?
I think we're talking about a handful of groups that would have this capability. Again, we don't know all the facts yet in terms of how they were able to gain access to the aircraft, what sort of weapons they had on board. Much of that information hopefully will become forthcoming in the next few weeks. But at this point, we simply have to gather all the information we can to make sure that we can carry out President Bush's vow to hunt down and punish those responsible for this, what Jim Baker just said, dastardly act. There are a few acts in our history that certainly measure up to the magnitude of the loss of life and what it means to this country, and I think that Jim Baker had it right. We're entering a new period, and it's going to cause us to focus our efforts in terms of reconciling what kind of a society we can continue to have where we have a persistent threat against innocent civilians in a democratic society. We're going to have to engage in a very constructive and intense debate on how we measure the trade-offs between protecting our people and protecting our civil liberties. And that's a debate that has yet to begin in earnest, but I'm sure that it will.
We now know that the president is in Nebraska, that he is in Sarasota, Florida this morning, where he was to give a speech on education to Louisiana. He's now in Nebraska participating in a national security briefing. Former Secretary of State George Shultz is with us as well. Mr. Secretary, I assume that most of the conversation is going from Washington to the president. What are they telling him, would you guess?
I don't know what we're telling him, but I know how I feel about this. First of all, there has been an act of war of the worst kind, namely against civilians, designed to disrupt and demoralize civilian life, as well as an act of war against the Pentagon. We know that this was carried out by an organization big enough to do something rather complex and complicated. So we have to know who those people are, and we have to go after them, but we have to do more than that. On the one hand, we have to learn what's coming and preempt it, and not be afraid to preempt potential terrorist acts against us. And then we have to look to our own security and give ourselves the kind of reassurance that we deserve, that we're doing the things necessary so we have our children back to our schools, our government officials back in their offices, and these people are not able to stop a resilient, powerful, strong country as we are.
Mr. Schultz, you said we ought not be afraid to preempt it. Have we been afraid to preempt it?
It's hard to preempt. Well, we've done some in the past. It's hard to preempt because you have to know who it is you're going after very clearly and have the right kind of intelligence. But it only underlines the importance of strong intelligence, not only electronic intelligence and photography and so on, but we have to have a very capable human intelligence to know and be able to preempt these sorts of things.
Secretary Cohn, you were in office, if memory serves me correctly, when the Cole was attacked. Obviously, this is a much more horrific event. Did the Cole incident flash back in your mind?
It flashed back in my mind, but also the bombings in East Africa flashed even more vividly before me, because they were, again, nearly simultaneous explosions directed against innocent civilians. And to follow up on Secretary Schultz just mentioned, we indeed did gather together and vow to have the long arm of justice reach out and take those down who are responsible for it, but we also took preemptive action. That was the basis on our attack in Afghanistan, when we had intelligence that there was to be a gathering.
Well, we're obviously having a lot of crosstalk and a technical problem. We'll sort it out and we'll try and get our guests back. We mentioned a moment ago there were 50,000 people who come to work each day at the World Trade Center. There are literally tens of thousands more who come into the city, each of them affected. But the effect of this, we suspect, is much broader than that it will affect everyone in the country. Former Secretary of State George Shultz says American life been changed. I know forever seems a bit farther than I want to go, but American life been changed today?
No. American life will pick up. We have to look to our security, obviously, and be careful about it. But we're not going to allow these terrible people to change our way of life. They just aren't going to be able to do it. We'll defend ourselves adequately. We will find out who they are. We will get rid of them, and we'll learn how to preempt these attacks. But we're not going to change our way of life because of these people. I reject that entirely.
And so we respond, and then people get on airplanes again with the same sense of security that they had before. People go to the Trade Center with the same sense of security they had before.
I'm afraid it'll be a while before they go to the Trade Center. But as far as the use of commercial aircraft are concerned, yes, I think we'll have our aircraft back in operation. We'll have to have tighten and be very careful as people get on these planes so that we feel secure that we've done everything possible to keep people off who obviously took over a plane. They did it very skillfully. The pilots apparently weren't able to put out any kind of an SOS, and they must have been able to fly the plane. So we're dealing with an organized group. They have to have a safe haven somewhere that allows them to do these things. So let's go after them.
Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us today. Secretary of State, former Secretary of State George Shultz, James Baker, former Secretary of State as well, and Secretary of the Treasury, and William Cohn, former Senator from Maine and Secretary of Defense in the Clinton administration, all joining in and all offering similar messages that what happened today cannot be allowed to change the basic core of American life, and that the United States must hold accountable and responsible, not simply those who carried out these actions in New York and in Washington, and perhaps another plane as well, the plane that crashed in Pittsburgh, but also any government that has turned a blind eye to terrorist groups, that has offered them safe haven or support, financial, physical support, whatever, that they must be held accountable as well. James Kallstrom, former FBI here in New York, joins us. He's in Delaware. Mr. Kallstrom, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
What are you hearing? Are you hearing things now? Do you have a network of people who are calling in, or that you're calling, who are telling you what they're finding out?
Well, I certainly have a network of friends, and they're busy doing their work, not calling me. The only people calling me right now are the news media.
Okay. What's going through your mind? What are the questions beyond the most obvious? Who did this? What is it that you want to know?
First off, just the immense tragedy of this event and the desire to save as many people as we can save in this terrible, terrible situation. Second thought is that, you know, since '93, with the bombing of the World Trade Center the first time, people that hate us and hate what we stand for and hate our way of life have demonstrated that over and over again. I don't have to go through all the different events, but we all know what they are. And today, they've brought that terrible hatred to the United States of America, and we as a country, as a nation, need to stand together. I agree totally with George Shultz, who I admire tremendously, that we need to go find out who these people are, and with respect to collateral damage, we need to not let this happen again. And I think this puts about 5 exclamation points on why we in this country need a sophisticated, dedicated, high morale team of intelligence agencies and law enforcement that work together. Not that if it was any better than it was the last 5 years, I'm not saying it wasn't good, but it needs to be the best and continue to be the best.
But you're suggesting it has not been good enough.
Well, in a free society, you know, it's virtually impossible to know everything about every bunch of cowards and crazy people that populate the world, unfortunately. But we need to get as close to that as possible without changing our way of life. And I think that exclamation point just hits home today, and we need to stop this. We need not to change our way of life. We need to find out who did this, and I'll tell you right now, that's a short list of people. And our government knows pretty much what that short list is. They're putting the final touches, I'm sure, and will over the course of the next few hours, next few days, and we need to do something about it.
Sir, thank you for your time today. Appreciate joining. We have shown you a number of times the video of this second plane that at 9:08 hit the Trade Center. We have, I believe, some still pictures of that plane as it moved. I'm seeing them for the first time with you, so bear with us. You can see that in the first shot, the plane approaching the Trade Center. And here in the second frame, you can see in the front, I believe what we saw there was the plumes of smoke and fire from the hit on the first building. The plane now visibly closer to the Trade Center building. It is just the most extraordinary and painful thing to look at because you know what's happening. Mr. Kallstrom, are you able to see these pictures, by the way? Mr. Kallstrom?
Yes, I am.
Were you able to see those?
I was able to see that, yes.
As you watch that, as you've seen that, I hear the anger builds, doesn't it?
It does. It certainly does build. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
I mean, we're trained in many ways, both of us, by profession, not to use words like unbelievable, and then you confront moments like this, where, in fact, unbelievable is about the only word that seems to apply.
Yeah, I just can't, having lived through the tragedy of TWA Flight 800, which, as sad as that was, I mean, this is geometrically worse. And just thinking about the personal terror of all the people involved in this, the people on those planes. I'm sure there's teenagers and babies and adults and just normal people on those airplanes that suffered tremendous terrorism.
Yes, sir. It is hard to imagine what it must have been like on those 4 airplanes, because while the attacks on the buildings themselves happened quite quickly, these people in these airplanes were aware that something horrible was happening for perhaps an hour. The flight from Boston to New York, right around an hour, a little bit less. Clearly, they knew this was something horrible had come into their lives, and they knew it for a long time.
That's probably true. And think about the fact that people obviously took control of the plane and knew something about flying one of these sophisticated fly-by-wire airplanes. I don't know how much they knew. They knew enough, obviously, to crash it into the building. I can't imagine any American pilot crashing an airplane into one of these buildings.
Now, sir,
even with a gun to their head, they wouldn't do that.
I was thinking exactly the same thing, that it is unimaginable to me, at least, that any pilot, no matter the circumstance, would have followed that order, crashed that plane into this building or that building. I don't know what they would have done, how they'd have dealt with it, but it is unimaginable they would have followed that order.
So you've got people that not only are willing to give up their lives for just a horrendously, in my view, stupid, cowardly act, but are sophisticated enough to fly a modern jet plane.
It was described by Secretary of State Shultz, and I don't know if you heard it, as an act of war against the United States. Do you see this as an act of war?
I think it's clearly an act of war. I think it's, in many ways, it's a different time, but it's everything that Pearl Harbor was and more. It just puts an exclamation point next to this dangerous world we live in, and the inability to appease people that are this demented with rhetoric. It hasn't worked. It's not going to work. We can see what happened today. All peace-loving people of the world, all people that believe in democracy and freedom need to stand against this. Any country that harbors or aids this type of activity anywhere in the world needs to declare which side they're on, and we need to seriously do something about this, and I believe we will.
Mr. Kellstrom, thank you for joining us to Washington, and our colleague Judy Woodruff. Judy.
Aaron, again, listening to your conversation with James Kellstrom and the others, it's we can only begin to grasp the magnitude of what's happened here. And I keep thinking back to what your New York City Mayor, Rudy Giuliani, said about 30 minutes ago. He looked at the camera and he said, it's safe here in New York City, everything is safe, but I would just say, without contradicting the mayor at all, that for so many people watching these pictures, it's very hard to believe or to know what is safe after 4 commercial jetliners caused the deaths that we have seen today. We have right now, we want to show you some pictures, some conversations with people on the streets of New York City this morning about the time of the airplane crashes into the World Trade Center. Let's listen.
The actual airplane hitting the building. It was surreal. As we looked at it, we thought it was something out of a movie. It just didn't seem real. The airplane just came in at a tilt. We heard the scream of the plane, then a crack, 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 boom, 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 and the plane just disappeared. You didn't see the plane anymore, and then you saw the blowout from the other side.
A lot of people equate this to something like Pearl Harbor. You were there. You saw this. Put yourself in perspective that this is nothing's ever happened like this.
Well, I now have images that will never leave my mind. As I'm walking up from We walked down from downtown up to Grand Central here, and I just keep seeing that airplane hitting. I saw also prior to the second airplane hitting while we were still standing there, I must have saw about 7 or 8 bodies flying through the air coming from 80 floors up. Just they'd fall from the debris, and you just saw them cartwheeling down, bouncing off the building. It was devastating. I'm not an emotional person in the least. I actually felt tremendous emotion at that point, because I do have a lot of friends in both buildings. And I do know that last time, as I said, it took 2.5 hours for somebody on the 70th floor to get out of that building. It's absolutely devastating. I believe, being down there, was tens of thousands of people dead. That's what I believe at this point.
So you're not an emotional person, I see your eyes.
I'm not emotional in the least, and now I'm very emotional about this. I have feelings of revenge, but I just sure hope that the government doesn't arbitrarily select an enemy and decide to, for political reasons, obliterate that enemy just for this. But I do hope they find the people that are responsible for this.
You're shot in the back. Joe, what do you do?
And fell and just hit and just blew out the plaza we were on.
It was complete dark. There is no light. So, thank God, somebody with little light came up, because we couldn't even see what's happening. We all, with dust and debris and.
How'd you get out?
Well, the firefighter, somebody with little light came eventually, and we were following him.
And go to. What did you do?
The police officer told everybody to form a human chain, and we held on to each other, and he flashed the light, and he directed us to Building 5, and we went out Building 5.
Did you see people bleeding, and what did you see?
Oh, everybody could see. You want blood? Here's blood. Everybody's bleeding. People are laying all over the floor. It's horrible. And I was there the first time, and this is twice.
CNN producer Rose Arce on the streets of New York. She's joining us by telephone. Rose, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Judy.
What are you seeing? Tell us where you are.
I am about 2 blocks north of where the World Trade Center used to be standing, and I'm surrounded by firefighters who are just watching helplessly. They've had to suspend their rescue operation, and they're just watching a burning hulk of building right now. The front part of the World Trade Center has completely sheared off, as well as many of the upper floors. And every few minutes you'll hear like a small sort of a rumbling sound, almost like an explosion sound, and another chunk of it will come flying down into the street, creating a situation where rescue personnel just have not been able to get close to this building now for over an hour.
Rose, how close are they to the building?
I'd say the closest people are probably about 2 blocks north of there, just in front of where I am. I spoke to a firefighter a few minutes ago that said that he had to stand there and watch helplessly as at least a dozen people leapt from the upper floors of this building during a fire.
Rose, when the mayor was asked this question at a news conference a little while ago, he said he wasn't able to answer, but given your vantage point, can you tell how large a perimeter, how many square blocks are we talking about that's been devastated?
Well, I'd say that at least, up to 4 blocks north, really 5 blocks north of the World Trade Center, there is debris on top of buildings. There are buildings that have been pierced by debris. The streets are covered with several inches of soot and literally pieces of people's desks. There's office supplies. Where I'm standing right now, I can see there's letters on the floor. There's one woman's resume. There's some insurance papers. Things that clearly came from inside that building.
And Rose, where again you are? How close to what's going on here?
I'm about I'd say about 2.5 blocks north of the World Trade Center.
And are you still seeing victims injured being taken away or walking away, or is that
right now there's absolutely nobody that's getting anywhere close to that building. There's just service officers, federal marshals. There are trucks from all over New York. I see license plates from New Jersey, people from upstate New York. There's just a small army of people here, but there's just really not a whole lot that they can do for whoever may be left right now, because it is just such a dangerous situation.
CNN producer Rose Arce, she's talking to us right now. She's a few blocks away from the World Trade Center, describing efforts by rescue personnel who just cannot get close because it is still a very dangerous situation. You heard her say large pieces of debris still coming down. And these pictures we're showing you, all of them taken earlier in the day since the first airplane hit the World Trade Center about 8:48 this morning. And again, these are those still pictures that Aaron first referred to a few minutes ago. Still pictures of a commercial jetliner. This was the second one to come in. This was the plane, the United Airlines Flight 175 that we now know has to be the one that Boeing 767 bound from Boston to Los Angeles. Instead, it ended up inside and going through incomprehensibly one of the towers of the World Trade Center. Just about a block and a half away here in Washington, a block and a half away from the White House, CNN senior White House correspondent John King. John, you were not traveling, of course, with President Bush, who went to Florida yesterday, but you have been talking to a number of people around the president who are trying to stay on top of what's happened.
Trying to stay on top of what has happened, Judy, despite the fact that from the ground up anyway, the White House complex, which you see behind me, the building itself and the old executive office building, which is home to a number of senior administration officials, a virtual ghost town, evacuated this morning. The president, as we have reported, is now at a military installation in the Midwest. The president, first from Florida, stopped at a military installation in Louisiana. He was briefed. Then there was talk that he would come back to Washington, and administration officials saying they believe that is politically very important to send a signal to get the president back to the White House as soon as possible. But the president instead stopped at a second military installation in Nebraska. We are told he is participating in a National Security Council meeting by telephone. Vice President Dick Cheney has been in the White House, underground in the White House Operations Center, the Situation Room, which is a fortified command and control structure, throughout the day with other national security officials, receiving information from around the country and directing U.S. operations from there. We do know on Air Force One en route from Louisiana to the Midwest, the president spoke to the mayor of New York and the governor of New York. He's been in constant contact with officials back here, including members of the congressional leadership, who also have been asked by their security to go to a secure bunker area built for just such a situation, a national security emergency in the United States. The leaders of Congress taken as well to a secure location. Again, the White House grounds were evacuated when all this was taking place this morning. From this perch up here, which you are familiar with from anchoring Inside Politics, you can still see smoke wafting up from the Pentagon and National Airport across the Potomac River, usually one of the nation's busiest, of course, now completely shut down as part of the security precautions being taken here. We are told there is a priority on trying to get the president back to the White House, but priority number one is the president's security. And I've spoken to several senior administration officials as well as some security sources who say at this moment they know of no specific additional threats, but of course they were caught so completely off guard this morning, extra precautions being taken because of the scope of these devastating terrorist attacks. Judy?
All right, John King at a location on top of an office building just a few blocks from the White House, as you can see, reporting on the scene there, where every federal building in the city of Washington has been evacuated. Joining us now on the telephone, former Georgia United States Senator Sam Nunn. Senator Nunn, are you in Atlanta, New York?
Judy, I'm in Wilmington, Delaware.
All right. Senator, longtime leader of the Senate Armed Services Committee, someone who has followed military affairs in this country for so long. What are you thinking right now?
First, it was certainly a day of hate in terms of what was perpetrated by whoever did this, and second, a day of sorrow for the people who are the victims and their families. And it certainly was a cruel and heartless and monstrous type attack. I think it's very important that we steadfast in this country. We always rise to the occasion and work together when we're in a crisis, and I think this qualifies for mustering the American will to remain calm and collected and determined and firm, but most of all, solidarity here at home with the president, following his lead with the governors, with mayors, with the people on the scene, the front lines, the firemen and the policemen and the medical personnel and the nurses and the doctors, people we take for granted every day, but God bless them, and we need to be with them and behind them and help them in every way we can. Certainly we need to learn lessons from this. We need to find out about the intelligence, find out why we didn't get some notification, whether we had information that we did not properly analyze, or whether all of those things come to mind.
Senator, I want to ask you about that, because there has to be many people out there watching who feel betrayed, who want to know why is it that how is it that something on this scale could be carried off when they thought the United States was the safest country on the earth?
Judy, I think that's a good question, and I think our intelligence people have to be asked those hard questions, and they will be. I think we also need to put it in perspective, though. We've had efforts against America for the last 20, 25 years, some of them almost of this magnitude in terms of the planning, and they've been warded off by law enforcement and intelligence. So we have to put it in somewhat perspective, and we have to also understand some of our other nations in the world have been under not exactly this kind of attack, but similar type terrorism for a long time, including Great Britain, including Israel and the Middle East, including Germany. So we have to understand that America is an open society, and we're vulnerable to this, and we need to do everything we can to tell the people of the world that we expect them to be solid with us, too, because we need world condemnation here. Certainly when we find out who did it, we need to retaliate, and we need to demand that the world stand solid with us in condemning any country that houses or supports terrorism.
All right, former United States Senator Sam Nunn, Democrat of Georgia, joining us on the telephone, longtime leader of the Senate Armed Services Committee and certainly a leader in U.S. military affairs. Speaking of military leaders, we have now joining us live from Little Rock, Arkansas, former NATO Commander General Wesley Clark. And General Clark, you and I talked a little bit earlier today about what's happened. I know you have sources. Have you learned any more about either... We've obviously been looking at pictures of the horrific evidence of what happened, but have you learned any more about suspicions, information, about what might have been behind this?
Well, actually, I know that there will be a great deal of effort underway to find out who could have contributed to this, and there are various groups who could have been part of it. These groups often change their names, they have interlocking memberships, and so it will take time to run this down. But I think it's clear now, with the hindsight of a few hours, that how well coordinated this attack was, that it was launched from multiple airports, that it picked aircraft that had the largest possible fuel loads to increase their explosive capacity, that the people who were involved knew how to take over aircraft and fly them into the targets. And clearly they had some idea of the symbols of American power that they wanted to strike. And so I think we've got to allow some time for our military to work through this. I am reassured in talking to people inside the Pentagon that the command and control system in there is totally intact. All of the men and women who were part of that command and control system are at their stations and have been throughout this. And so it's very smooth and very effective. I'm thinking about all those people who were in that part of the Pentagon that was struck by the aircraft. We know there are a number of men and women who served there who aren't accounted for, and presumably there are casualties and fatalities there. But the command and control functions are totally intact.
But General Clark, what do you say to Americans, and this is the same version of the question I just put to Senator Nunn, who would say, we thought we lived in the safest country on earth, and now we find out that places that we thought were in, at least I'm informed that Senator Orrin Hatch has said to some of my colleagues at CNN there was an indication that Camp David may have been a target of the jetliner that crashed in Pennsylvania. This is the sort of thing that makes people want to reevaluate everything.
Well, I've heard the same rumor about Camp David, but we know that for all of our unique power in the world today, the United States is also uniquely vulnerable. We've been targeted for years by a number of these groups, and many people have warned for some time that there's really no ultimate protection against terrorism, and particularly international terrorism. There's no telling how many of these efforts that are similar or perhaps lesser in scale have been broken up by the United States or by our allies, and yet this one has succeeded, and I know there'll be some hard questions asked. But Judy, one thing that comes through very clearly in this is that in an era where global communications are the way they are, and there's movement of people and ideas and communications, that it's not possible to have only one nation deal with the problem of international terrorism. Greater international cooperation and coordination is required, and certainly no state should be supporting and sponsoring the presence inside its borders or the activities out of its borders of international terrorists. And that's one very important message that comes from this terrible tragedy, and I'm sure our government will drive this home very strongly in all of the international fora. I was just on the phone with people in Europe, and as you probably know, NATO headquarters has responded by ordering the evacuation. Of course, by the North Atlantic Charter, an attack on one member of NATO is an attack on all of NATO. And how this will play itself out in coordination with our allies remains to be seen. But here's clearly an area where the United States desperately does need the support of all of our allies, and I'm sure we'll have that support as we deal with the consequences of this tragedy.
General Wesley Clark, a former NATO commander, joining us from Little Rock, Arkansas. General, thank you for joining us once again today.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you.
Aaron in New York City.
Judy, there was something absolutely chilling as General Clark walked through the planning that must have taken place. The planes that were picked, the reasons that those planes were selected is absolutely chilling. CNN's Mike Hanna in our bureau in Israel joins us now. Whenever something like this happens, I guess you look to the Middle East. Mike, what's the situation in Israel now?
Well, Aaron, in an area that has been racked by violence by nearly a year, all have been closely watching events as they've unfolded in the United States. There has been a blanket condemnation from all leaders in the region of the events that have taken place there and commiseration about the extensive loss of life that has occurred. However, when news of the events started to filter through in Palestinian areas, there were sporadic incidents of celebration in the streets in